All right. Hello, everyone. I am Michael Zupan with BitesizeImpressions.com, and I'm here with the Greatness Delayed podcast, which is what we have decided to call it here. And with me this evening is someone in my own time zone. Hello.
Hey, how's it going? I said this off the mic, but I like the title of the podcast.
Nice. Yeah, I like it too. We were just chatting about the last E3 podcast that we had, uh, which seems like an eternity ago now. Oh, you know what? I messed up. I have I had the stream open in the background, so I was hearing that, so I had to pause for a second. Little
Whoops,
uh,
party
noob
foul.
glitch there.
That's all
So,
good.
Gus, you are in New York, right?
I live in New Jersey, but I live in the part of New Jersey that's literally like the Hudson River's right there. So
Oh, okay.
I
That's cool.
consider it like this is where all the Brooklyn like bohemians go to escape New York rent control.
Well, that's not a bad idea. I mean, I can imagine it's bazonkers. I mean, I live in New York State. I'm just a few hours north of the city. So I didn't know if you knew that that's where I lived. But yeah, the rent here is, well, we're not renting. We just bought a house, and the
Congrats.
taxes in this area are reasonable. We pay, I mean, even like about half of what some people in other close towns around us pay. So it's awesome.
Yeah, Jersey property taxes are awful. So it's always amazing when like a friend of mine or whoever like manages to buy a house. But
And for anybody who's watching, just in case you get confused, Gus does not have the camera. He's audio only. But we'll get right to it. This edition of the podcast tonight, we want to sit down and talk about Metal Gear Solid 5 and basically everything that encompasses, because you can't just have a conversation about this particular game without delving into the history a little bit. It's all very, very unique. To start, I think it was around 2012 when we started to hear news as consumers that Metal Gear Solid 5 was coming. And it might have been at the same time, it might have been just a little while after that we heard that it was actually going to be divided into two parts. The first being Ground Zeroes, the other being Phantom Pain. And I think there was even a little news back and forth where people were like, oh, it's just sort of a ruse for Kojima to throw us off, and it's actually going to be one game. And they're like, no, 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 it's actually going to be two parts. A lot of people weren't really sure what that was going to mean for them until, I guess, a little bit later we found out what the deal was. Ground Zeroes was a prologue to the Phantom Pain preceding the events of that complete game, so to speak. And even then, we weren't entirely sure what the breakdown was going to be like. Eventually, we started hearing in interviews with Kojima that it was basically going to be like, you know, a way to get you to learn the ropes with the new open world system that the Phantom Pain would have. And everybody seemed okay with that until like maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks before release. As always, someone managed to get their hands on a copy of the game a little bit early, and they went online and were like, the main mission of Ground Zeroes you can beat in like 9 minutes. Do
yeah,
you recall that?
I do because I think I first read it in Game Informer that they had the story that they finished the main. Well, what really started was that I think that Game Informer said they had beaten the main story mission within 5 minutes, and it kind of started getting everyone freaking out because then the price got announced that the game was going to be like I think like 40 or $50 on the now current gen consoles, and then it was going to be like $10 less on the last generation consoles. But
Yep.
then it was like the two news meshed together, so people were freaking out that they might be paying $40 for 5 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, I actually went for the physical copy because anytime that I can in this industry, I want to vote with my wallet, and I'll buy the physical copy, even if it costs a little bit more. And it was $40. And it's just as you said, that story came out, and everybody started to wig out about this. Why am I going to spend $40 or $30 if it's digital?
It
Why
should
am
be
I
a
going to spend
demo.
Yeah, for a tech demo about Metal Gear Solid, why am I going to pay that much money? It's ridiculous. Fortunately, there was a little voice of reason that started to creep into the mix a little closer to release, because other people started to get their hands on it as well, including reviewers. And they're like, yeah, technically you can beat it really, really fast, but that's sort of a speed run. You have to know all your surroundings in this area, Camp Omega. You have to know where the guards are, where they're going to be stationed at, what their movements are like. You have to know where to go, when to go there, and everything, in between. For other people, it's going to take them a while to figure things out. There's going to be a lot of replay value in terms of trying to better your time and your ability to get in and out. And there's also going to be other side ops missions for you to complete as well. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy this game. I'll take their word for it. It is Metal Gear Solid. I'm really psyched for it. I've been wanting to play this for a while. And it was very, very good. But personally, my assessment of gameplay versus cost, I was kind of disappointed. What about you, Gus?
Oddly enough, like I actually do. I see where you're coming from completely, because I understand people want that kind of value, which is why we get people like arguing about when multiplayer only games are still like $60 price and such. But oddly, I remember when it came time to write Game of the Year list last year, and Metal Gear Solid was like somewhere actually in my top 10, because I think because that game, it wasn't that narrative heavy, oddly, for Metal Gear games. So because it really just wanted to teach you the ropes to play Phantom Pain, and I think just because the sandbox approach to the gameplay, that I was just goofing around with it so much that by the end of it, I felt like I got my money's worth. But I still understand when people felt like it was like kind of a small package for what they were selling. But I still had fun with it in the end.
Yeah, the part of the problem for me is that I've never been very good at stealth games in general. And Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, because it sort of just throws you right on the edge of the base and expects you to just do your thing and do it well, because it doesn't give you a lot of the tools that make things a little simpler at times in the Phantom Pain. So it was a lot more harsh of an experience just walking into it as sort of a learn the ropes sort of situation. But it probably took me like 2.5 hours to actually go through and complete the objective in the main mission. There were side ops that I didn't really do until much later, but I'd say all in all, around release, I probably personally put about maybe like 8 hours into it, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But yeah, $40 was still a really steep price point. For $20, I think it would have been much more reasonable. And at this point, there isn't anybody who shouldn't have played this who has a next-gen console, because it's now been free on both the Xbox One and the PS4 for a grand total of 0. So it's well worth it. But it's interesting that you brought up the narrative. The narrative of Ground Zeroes was not really in my face back then. But because I've been replaying it recently, just before the launch of Phantom Pain, it all started jumping out at me. Do you have any comments about the narrative of Ground Zeroes, Gus?
Not like this might lead into a lot more maybe in-depth, or it's a larger conversation at hand, but basically, I'm sorry, I'm like stammering. In order to really get Ground Zeroes, you had to have played Peace Walker, kind of like to have any sort of attachment to what was going on in that game's world. And I hadn't. I played maybe 2 hours of Peace Walker, and I just kind of left it alone. So even though the narrative was somewhat interesting, it got weird if you listen to the cassette tapes. Yeah. And all the implications about Chico and Paz, and it's what are you doing with this? And then the helicopter scene, which there's so much more weirdness to that when you play the Phantom Pain. And it was just okay, I you know what, I tend to shrug off Metal Gear narratives, and I say shrug off, I don't say dismiss, because I think if you've been playing this series long enough, you either you think Kojima is like some kind of secret genius, or you think he's off his rocker. And I fall into the latter, honestly. Like, so
Not only that, but there's a lot of people who are like die-hard fans of the franchise for gameplay reasons. And you can go online now and you hear people say, you know what, if you've never played any of the games in this series before, don't worry, because I've played all of them and I still don't know what the fuck's going on in the story.
Yeah. And that's not always a good thing either. Like,
not exactly. And you know what? There is a much more simplified story being told within the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
But it is convoluted with a lot of extra stuff to really drag things out. So yeah, I didn't really get a connection with the characters in Ground Zeroes for the same reason that you said, because I didn't play Peace Walker. I played a bit of Metal Gear Solid 3. I didn't complete it. I played a lot of Metal Gear Solid 4, but that takes place later on in the timeline. So it's really neither here nor there. But that's the thing. They introduced us to us people who didn't play Peace Walker to this Skullface guy, right? And he's really sort of a hokey sort of, you see him in the beginning, you hear him at the end sort of guy at Ground Zeroes. And if that's all you took with you from that experience of Ground Zeroes, you're like, how am I supposed to feel about this guy? But when you're crawling around Camp Omega and you find these audio tapes and you listen to them and you hear the things that are going on with these characters at this camp, this base, we're talking like gang rape, okay? Yeah. We're talking torture. We're talking, and at this point, I don't think it's a spoiler to anyone, and it is only a prologue to The Phantom Pain. I don't want to be really spoilery tonight, but we're talking stuff like bombs up vaginas. I mean, it's really horrible, deep, terrifying stuff, and I got the feeling playing Ground Zeroes that Kojima is really going for the gold when it comes to sort of shock value in explaining to people through the video game medium just how terrible war can be, and how and to sort of make that feel personal for you on the inside by showing you this kind of stuff is, people will stop at nothing, the evils of the world. And I think that's what those audio tapes were all about. I don't really like that sort of stuff is hidden away in a game, and you really have to find it in order to have that. Otherwise, you miss that point entirely. But the point was to make this Skullface guy seem like a really, 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 really nasty prick, and to set up this story of revenge, and to make you want to seek that no matter what the cost. So we'll file that in our memory banks for a little bit later down the road in this podcast, because that's going to be very, very important when we're talking about the story of The Phantom Pain. So after Ground Zeroes was done, and we all played it, and we all sort of came to our consensus of, well, it was really good, but maybe it wasn't quite worth that much money. There's a lot of people who probably disagree with that. I know that Gabe, who's usually on the podcast with us, he is sort of, my go-to Metal Gear nerd guy. I mean, he's got encyclopedic knowledge of the franchise, and when I talk to him about this series, he's like, man, I've got like 28 years of history with this franchise. Like, literally, he's that in deep to it. Yeah, he's bonkers about the Metal Gear, so I always go to him about the story and everything like that, and discussing other things going on, and he's like, I think he told me he'd probably spend at least 30 hours playing Ground Zeroes.
God.
Yeah, it seemed a little excessive to me, but I can see why someone would do that, especially if you're really that much of a fan of the gameplay and everything like that. So, especially since there's so many different ways, as you said, you could mess around with the gameplay mechanics and figure everything out. And just sort of mess around. I don't know how many times I played through Camp Omega before I realized, oh shit, there's a storm drain I can crawl through.
Yeah.
That makes things so much easier. None of that stuff was spelled out for you, and I actually appreciated that about the game. So anyway, Ground Zeroes came, it went. Then there was another about year and a half period that was really sort of interesting. And by that, there was a lot of news. It started off good, and it went south really, really fast. First, somewhat unrelated, there was a demo that came out, I think around probably Halloween of 2014, that was called PT. And it was a scary, scary sort of thing, and everybody was sort of falling head over heels over this thing. Did you get a chance to play that, Gus?
PT was my game of the year last year.
Wow.
Which not only speaks to the experience I had with PT, but it also kind of spoke to what a like kind of barren year last year was, like depending on your game tastes. But no, it was PT was just like one of those experiences like if you were playing games in the 80s or 90s, like you couldn't look stuff up. You had to like talk to your friends. Did you try this? Did you try that? Like, cause and it's literally a repetitive game because you're marching through the same hall, but different things happen. But it was like such a good experience until like, you got to the end, which, I don't want to jump the gun. So you can keep going, but it was definitely like just a fun experience I had.
I didn't personally care for the PT demos, walk down this hall and just sort of figure out what the right triggers are so that you can keep progressing.
Yeah.
That seemed a little annoying to me, but I'll give PT one thing. It is one of the most effective horror experiences I've ever played on a video game console. So when it was sort of revealed that this was really more or less just a demo for a Silent Hill game called Silent Hills that Hideo Kojima was working on with Guillermo del Toro, and it was going to be their project. I mean, I was excited at the prospect of what was going to come, and so were fans everywhere. As you said, there are people just like you who are like, oh, wow, it's like my favorite game that I've played on the PS4 so far, and it's free. I don't have to pay anything for it. So there was a lot of excitement over it. As we sort of moved past that, though, and got into 2015, we started hearing a lot of rumors. I think it started out with like maybe there was a communication breakdown between Konami and Kojima, and that somebody was being fired or let go, namely Kojima.
Because
eventually.
Oh, sorry. No, you know what? Maybe you remember the timeline better than I do, because I think what I remember it all triggered it was that like his name. I don't know where the whole his name was taken off. Phantom Pain was wedged in there. I feel like that's how I first like started hearing like there was some rumblings, unless like something else had happened. But that's the only thing that stuck out, and that kind of got the ball rolling on this like rift between Kojima Productions and Konami.
I'm honestly not sure if that started the chain of events publicly or if it was after the fact.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a huge part of it. Either way, the whole situation is messed up, and it basically amounted to eventually a joint message, sort of a very diplomatic one, being released, a joint statement by Kojima and Konami saying, yes, Kojima's parting ways. He's going to be going on his own, and that's basically it. He said not to worry. He was going to finish the Phantom Pain. He was going to see that through to the end. He wasn't just going to, up and leave. They were going to finish that game. And then at the end of 2015, like after December, that's when he was officially going to be done with Konami, and they were going to go their separate ways. This was horrible news to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. To start, obviously, does this mean no more Metal Gear? It was sort of Kojima's baby, but I think everybody sort of needs to realize that Kojima has really been sort of trying, but not too hard, to step away from this franchise for a really, really long time.
He has been saying, I'm done with this franchise since the second Metal Gear Solid. That was 2001. After he made the first one, the first Metal Gear Solid for PlayStation, that he's like, okay, I'm done. That's like, play Metal Gear Solid 2 again. You'll see it, and it's just like, yep, this dude was done. Like, he read some postmodern books and watched a lot of Kubrick movies or something, and was like, you know what, this, that. That's Metal Gear Solid 2. And it seemed like every single time that a new game came out, I'm done.
Yeah, I think even what happened during the phase of Metal Gear Solid 3 is I think his team actually went to like develop the game without him, with his blessing, of course. But then after a while, he, saw what they were doing, and then, he's just like, okay. And then he got himself involved with it again. He couldn't just walk away from it. And I guess that was supposed to be the last one. I don't know the development story with him in regards to Peace Walker, but of course, then there was Metal Gear Solid 4. And Metal Gear Solid 4, it seemed like it was the end. It seemed like it was supposed to be sort of his swan song and sort of playing to the fans of the franchise, because it seemed like the whole thing was littered with references that only fans would get.
It's that half that game is fan service. There's a whole chapter about going back to Shadow Moses, and even and I won't even say that's always a bad thing, because even when I as wrestling fans, I guess, would say marked out, like when I went back to Shadow Moses, and it was like a fun like kind of revisit to that, especially for the graphics that PS3 produced at the time,
Yeah, I don't mind fan service in a game like that as far as that's concerned, when it's like story and going back to places that you had already been before. There is that nice feeling of wrapping everything up in a nice little bow so that you can say, okay, I've got closure, the series has ended, and here we go. Metal Gear Solid 5. Not only are we getting Metal Gear Solid 5, but then there's Ground Zeroes, and then there's Phantom Pain. So yeah, it upset a lot of different people, because they're really heavily invested. You could ask Gabe again if he ends up he's online. I'm trying to get him invited in here, and he's not receiving my invites for whatever reason. So hopefully he's able to join us at some point.
I'll say too, man.
But if you ask him, right? I mean, just spending 30 hours on Ground Zeroes again,
Yeah. I'll say though too, what a weird cult of, if you followed that whole Konami Kojima rift, it's so weird what a cult of personality Kojima has, because the moment like you heard of the rift, like it seemed like everyone, without even knowing all the facts, was like on Kojima's side, and it made Konami like public enemy number one.
And it's still that way.
It's
still that way. The whole thing about what was going on between Kojima and Konami is that nobody knew anything. Not only did nobody know anything, I mean, even the people that were working inside, there were reports. Again, this is all just conjecture. We don't really know how true this is. But there were reports from inside basically saying that the team working on Metal Gear Solid 5, they couldn't have any contact with the outside world. They had no access to internet. They were monitored heavily, even on their lunch breaks. It was a very, very, very constricting sort of a work environment. And that can't be very pleasant, because the last year, maybe 2 years of a video game development cycle, it's hell for developers in a normal situation.
Yeah.
And if this was really going down the shitter and fast and hard, as the reports that we were hearing online, it had to have been hell. Because I mean, people who work on these games, they work long hours every day. They give up their friends and family basically for a while to be able to finish these games. And granted, over in the East, their work ethic is a lot more than what we've got going on here in the United States. They're just, a very work sort of oriented society, where I won't get into it. Yeah. But I guess like you couldn't get fired. What they would do instead is they would rather take you and make you a janitor or something like that. Those are the reports that were coming out. All sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah, it came out of Nikkei, which is like a big publication, I think, in Japan.
Yep. So, yeah. I mean, everybody was on Twitter, hashtag fuck Konami.
Yeah.
And I didn't really sort of know what to make of all of it. I sort of assumed that things were going south when I saw Konami, as you said, taking Hideo Kojima's name off of promotional art, and also seeing it removed from the actual video game, case art as well. That was something that was really disheartening to see. And they're like, okay, well, if they're having their differences, if they're going their own ways, why would Kojima do this? It's a really tasteless thing to do. Isn't that right, Gabe?
Hey, am I in?
you're in. Hi.
Hey, how are you, man?
Hey, yes.
How's it going?
So, yeah, you're right. Whatever you were saying.
I was saying that removing Hideo Kojima's name from promotional art and even the case artwork is tasteless. Tasteless, I should say.
I don't even know what to think anymore. I mean, what if he wanted it removed? Nah,
Yeah, very true.
nah. He put it everywhere in the
Right.
game.
And that's the point. If you play through Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, it's a good theory based on other stuff that we're going to talk about a little bit later, that maybe he wanted his name removed from the game.
It wasn't even just Metal Gear. It was like the Zone of the Enders collection. Like on the website, his name was taken off. Zone of the Enders. Like
every single promotional material from Konami or any public material had the name removed.
Right. So I mean that's the whole shitstorm that we were dealing with. It was dirty, and it was making everybody freak out. And what made things even worse is that everybody started saying, "Oh my God, I hope this means that Silent Hills isn't going to be canceled." And then Konami was like, "Fuck you, it's canceled." So that happened, and it made a lot of people upset, especially since there's a lot of people who love The Walking Dead, and they now love Norman Reedus, and Norman Reedus was going to be involved with the project, and he's like, "Nah, it's not gonna happen." So he wasn't involved anymore. Guillermo del Toro, even after this whole thing has gone away, he's like, "I'm never going to work on another video game again." So everybody is just sort of losing their mind. And even today, there's a story that came out because I'll look it up real quick. Guillermo del Toro, he revealed today on Twitter that Junji Ito, who is, he says, the undisputed master of horror in Japan, was also going to be a collaborator on Silent Hills. And
I believe he's in one of the interviews in the collector's edition DVD Blu-ray. Sorry.
Guillermo del Toro?
No, that Japanese guy.
Oh, okay, Junji Ito or whatever the name is. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Japanese names worth a fuck. So, but yeah, so it was really, 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 really bad, and things didn't get any better as we started to stray away from the rumors. Though, then an actual conspiracy started to reveal itself, which Gabe knows plenty about, and if there's anything that he wants to discuss on details of this, he can feel free to do so. We can talk about it, but. Basically, there was this idea that somebody pointed out that the doctor that we saw in Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain promotional footage, or footage of the game that we saw ahead of time, not only looked like, but had the exact mannerisms and the same voice and also accent as a neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, whatever, Dr. Canavero. And everybody was like,
I stayed out of that because that was too nuts even for me. Like I was like, I'm out. Like, okay.
It was very nuts, and when I heard this happening, I even said to myself, I was like, you know what? Maybe this is Konami trying to distance themselves from Kojima. Kojima went way too far, trying to stick with the story, trying to shock people so much that he went out on a limb, and he used the likeness of this person for his game, and we didn't know how it was going to be utilized in the game. We didn't know if it was going to be for better or worse, but knowing Kojima and the kind of content that he likes to kind of shove down your throat, he really went from the very, very, very campy vibe back in the day of espionage into really sort of hammering home the horrors of war. There's still camp in the acting and everything like that, but he's really been hammering that for a while now. So we couldn't really assume that it was going to be great. So somebody, I guess, Skype contacted Dr. Canavero and like, "Hey, do you know that you're going to be in this game?" And he's like, "No, I didn't. I guess I'll talk to my attorney about that." And Gabe here, that wasn't good enough for Gabe. Gabe was like, "How come this is the story that everybody's running with and nobody's asking the important fucking question, what's next? What's happening next? Why doesn't nobody want to know this?" So what did you do, Gabe?
I just called. First, I looked for the number like first I looked up who this guy was because I remembered I had his name in the back of my head, and it turned out that I did hear from him in Italian news back in 2008 or so when he woke up from a coma, 2 patients. And then I started looking through the hospitals where he works and stuff like that. And then I called him, and I was like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so from the PlayStation Magazine, and I'd like to have an interview with you." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he's super weird. And so basically, I was one of those in the conspiracy camp because fuck me, it was really, really, really similar. And the more I talked to him, like he was telling me, "No, I'm not. Like seriously, I know nothing about video games," and yet like his voice and the way he speaks, it's like that's the guy from the game. But anyway, he sent me all the documentation, the police papers and whatnot, so it turned out he was telling the truth.
And we're jumping the gun a little bit because basically what Gabe is saying here is that the whole conspiracy online is as soon as there was that connection made between that there was a real-life Dr. Canavero that looked and sounded exactly like this doctor in the game, everybody automatically assumed that this was some sort of promotional conspiracy thing that Kojima was sort of pulling the strings on. But Gabe, as he just said, he talked to this guy and he's like, "Nope, here's police paperwork."
Yeah, because it happened right when there was the theory of Big Boss not being Big Boss but being Gray Fox. And the theory then turned into, oh my God, they swapped the head of Big Boss with one of Gray Fox, which would have been maybe acceptable in this game. Anyway, yeah.
So yeah, but that just goes to show that's another conspiracy that sort of just unraveled in everything else that was going on between everything people didn't know about Konami and Kojima.
Look, can I say something though?
Yeah, absolutely.
All the stories that have popped out in forums, in the media, in press, and whatever before the game are actually a better story than the story of the game itself.
I will agree with you.
In a bit, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So that was the shitstorm of everything that was happening up to the release of the Phantom Pain. Well, the Phantom Pain, it finally did come out, and prior to release, of course, the review embargo lifted a bit earlier than most other games. Sometimes games don't get it until like midnight the day of release, but this had at least a healthy week, right?
Yeah, it seemed like that. I had to be like a week before the actual release because I was hearing about this game as early as like late August.
Right, and that's sort of the recollection that I have too. And of course, everybody was giving this game near perfect review scores across the board. 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5. This game's amazing. And well, let's talk about that a bit, shall we? First, I think it's important that we start with the overall aspect of the game. This is Metal Gear Solid, and one thing that I was really concerned about before this game came out was that Ground Zeroes was one thing. Ground Zeroes put you at this base, and it wasn't huge, it wasn't small, but there was only so much that you could do. But actually going into an open world setting, I was concerned that that was sort of going to take away from the feeling of the tightness and the dread that sort of mounts as a result of that. And having that open world environment, I wasn't sure that being able to side saddle your horse so that the enemies didn't see you on the other side of the horse was really going to translate that well. And also being able to view an enemy camp from afar and know where everybody was as you were going in, I wasn't sure it was going to work out. But I got to say, the open world gameplay in the Phantom Pain, especially me saying before that I'm not very good most of the time with these sort of stealth games, it is amazing. I know you guys want to say the same thing.
Like I told you, like before we started talking, it's that like you know, there are things about Metal Gear Solid 5's open world where you have so many amazing moments, and then there are moments about Metal Gear Solid 5 where you're like, what in the hell were they thinking with this? I'm not even just I'm still talking about just like gameplay mechanics and design and stuff. But you know, it's like, you know, like one of my favorite open world experiences has been Grand Theft Auto 5, and not like, and I'll use that as an example because it's not so much about what you can do in that open world, but the fact that that open world seems like it can exist without your input. And, you know, that's great for its own reason. And then, like, Metal Gear Solid 5, I think the open world embellishes one thing that's always been great about the series, I think since 2, and it's that it gives you, like, such an appreciation for the little things, not only that you can do, but that goes on around you. So, like, these things exist sort of based on your input, but they adapt to you. Like, the world adapts to you. Kind of like in the way Grand Theft Auto 5 adapted to you in its own way, sort of, but this game, like, adapts to you. And it made some of the open world experiences really great. And then there are also some criticisms I have with the open world, which, you know, I guess we can all get into as we keep going.
Certainly. Gabe, how do you feel about the open world aspect of the game in general?
I'm not sure how I feel. Like, it's the bases are, some of them are really good, well designed, and you know, part of me hates that it's open world, but also I think it's a substitute for the quiet time or the alone time, if you want to put it that way, that you get in some of the old games. Best example being Metal Gear Solid 3. It's always up and down, up and down. Like, you have continuous crescendos of action, and then you have the alone time, and then there's another crescendo. And I think this could be the purpose of this open world. And one thing that not many pay attention to is that, yeah, it's tedious and it's boring sometimes to travel from location to location, but it's made in a way that it forces you to, when you arrive the first time in a place, like, you think you've been choosing the way you approach a story mission the first time or whatever, but if you pay attention to the landing zones, they all force you to land in a way that you have this sort of spectacular entrance to the. It's difficult to explain, but it's very, very well crafted. I don't know if it was necessary, to be honest, but I guess it kind of ties into gameplay, and honestly, I have very little problems with the gameplay of this game. So, like, nitpicks.
I agree with you. As far as my money is concerned, the gameplay portion of Phantom Pain alone is probably up there as the most addicting that I've played in 2015, if not even beyond. Before this game came out, I spent a lot of time this year with The Witcher 3, which is, of course, another very big open world game that came out this year. And The Witcher 3, for me, the open world is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty fantastic with how it's laid out and how much detail there is and how it's designed and all the different areas that you can visit. And in many ways, I feel like that game, objectively, is overall better than the Phantom Pain. However, just gameplay-wise, Phantom Pain, I think, has to take it home for me. It's so fun because, as you said, there's different landing zones that you can choose, and you drop down, and then you head towards your objective. Now, sometimes this is a very freeing, but there are certain times where this can be a little... it's a little frustrating because once you're in it, you're like, oh, great, I have this huge open map that I can run through. But at the same time, you do come to these very gamey aspects that sort of say, no, you can't go there. Being that, part of this game takes place in Afghanistan for a while, it's all desert and very rocky. And I feel like they put a lot of the rocky stuff very strategically in spots so that you can't just, say, because there's roads that go all around the map, and there's guard outposts every once in a while that you come to. Well, why can't you just go through the middle of all that and bypass them altogether? Because rocks. That's why. They put them there specifically just high enough. They're like maybe that far out of your reach so you can't grab them, or higher, but they put them there so that you can't go around them, and you sort of have to kind of weave your way through anyway. So that's a little frustrating. But for the most part, for missions, you choose your landing zone, you go in somewhat far away from the base or whatever, and you get out your binoculars, you can tag all the enemies, and you can sort of formulate what the best entryway is going to be, the path of least resistance, and work your way in from there. And you could do this any way you want. And I love that. And for somebody like me who's not amazing at stealth games, I felt like that it was much more accessible to me without having been dumbed down. Does that make sense?
Like sort of. Like I'm still trying to piece together, because I guess because I didn't have too many problems with the landing zones, because I just kept blowing up those anti-air installments. The one thing though, one example though, because I really focused on more when you guys were talking about that, the landing zone stuff, because it's like that's an example of like how good and bad kind of come together in terms of like execution and design, because the very first time that you're flying into a landing zone and you're like seeing all the land like from like high in the air, it's like this really great immersive experience until you're doing it for like the 80th time. And then the weird design in which you pick a mission, let's say you pick a story mission, and then you drop into a certain area and you're dropped like a distance away from it, but it's kind of annoying because you want to bring like a particular buddy that's not the horse, but then you're like left walking like 500 meters because you brought Quiet or the dog with you, and like you're left like kind of just like sprinting or like wasting GMP or whatever on a vehicle, and it's kind of this weird, like that's why it's like so up and down, that like open world design, and like a lot of it's barren. Like I'm like 50-50 on the Afghanistan map, for example, because a lot of it is barren, and it seems like, and not that you have to keep filling it with stuff to do something, but like I don't know, it just feels like it's just a while before something happens. But when you get there too, like you could have fun with it in your own Metal Gear way. But.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake, the biggest missed opportunity, I guess, is that there are factions in this game, and you could have had a fucking full-blown out war always going on independently from you in both the maps, and they didn't, which is something that Kojima wanted to fucking do since like 15 years ago, and he tried to do it with Metal Gear Solid 4. He could have carried that over with this one, but yeah. And it wasn't bad in Metal Gear Solid 4. Like the first chapter was like, you kind of felt like there was a fucking war, and if you actually stopped and watched what was going around, you could see fucking building fall down. You could see like shit happened, and it would have been kind of awesome here. And instead, you got this weird missions in which you have to help the Mujahideen, and they do fucking zero, and I don't know.
You know what? I think Gabe brings up a really good and interesting point, because a lot of past Metal Gear games have had at least like one good, arguably like overlooked idea, and I actually didn't think about. I remember in Metal Gear Solid 4 where you didn't so much have antagonist. Like it wasn't like when you go into Shadow Moses and all the guards were looking out for one guy. In Metal Gear 4, these people were fighting war, and it was like you could fight against either side. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that mechanic like didn't adapt or even make it over to Phantom Pain in some way. Just like sometimes I would play, in Phantom Pain, and if you haven't played it, or you haven't really gone in depth with it, like you can do little things where guards are posted, and you can affect how they react to the environment later. Like you can destroy communications equipment, and they can't radio in for backup if you do that. Like they'll be like, "What just happened here?" And then they can't radio for backup. Or you can destroy or turn off their power. So you blow up their power and you're in a night mission. They're not getting anything done because they can't see. And we can go into more of adaptation later, but like I was playing through the forts a bit, and one of my favorite things about Metal Gear Solid 3 that I feel like doesn't get mentioned that much is when you were able to destroy enemies' food and weapon supply.
Yes. And I'll tell you what,
you can
do some stuff like that in this one.
And I wish that carried over.
You do that like in the menu, right? From the iDroid with the fucking what is it called? Combat
deployment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's stupid because you could have had trucks going around the actual map, and you could do that. And then if you blow up, like, I don't know, 10 trucks, then they start escorting the trucks. Like, it could have been a very interesting open world.
Yeah, and I think both of you just brought up a very, very interesting point about this whole thing. And I think the reason why maybe that's not being done here, because story-wise, there absolutely are factions that could have been at play against one another on the map at any given moment. But instead what we get is we just basically get the one force most of the time that we're against, and they're sprinkled around the map with bases and with guard outposts on roads. And as you progress through the game, there's more enemies and they have more things at their disposal. But I think that's probably development-wise, probably a trade-off that Kojima made. Do I want to go do this thing that I did a lot more in the very linear-styled Metal Gear Solid 4, or do I want the world to react to the gamer? And I think that's what he was going for.
You know what, though? It does tiptoe into the discussion, which I anticipated we might have been having, because I've seen it a bit online, where this is arguably, or maybe not so arguably, that it is basically an unfinished game. That this is,
it is. It absolutely is.
And I told you, Mike. I didn't tell Gabe at the, when he asked me to do this, I told him I still haven't finished it, and then like I spoiled everything for myself anyway, and like knowing what happens story-wise, like it kind of lessened my returning to the game. I'm still kind of playing it, but like I don't feel what I was feeling when I went through Chapter 1, essentially.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gamers out there that do not feel that the game, once they hit Chapter 2, of which the mission structure of the game, the way it's laid out, there's only Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. There's like close to 50 missions in the game overall, not including the side ops missions that you tackle, which I think there might be like 150 of those. But yeah, a lot of people out there give the opinion that Chapter 2 is a mere shadow of what the first chapter was. First chapter didn't have so much going on in the way of story, at least compared to what other Metal Gear Solid games have had before it, and partially because of the open world environment and how that sort of impacts the way the story is presented to the gamer. But they're like, it seems like a lot of the missions that I'm playing in Chapter 2 are just rehashes of the same missions, just a little more difficult.
There's only 6 new missions in Chapter 2.
Which
says a lot, because there's at least 15 missions.
6 of like, yeah.
2, right?
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 is I believe 30 or 31.
Yep.
Somewhere around there.
It's a shame. I do want to get into the narrative a bit more, because there's a lot of things to be taken into consideration with the narrative, but still focusing on the gameplay. There's aspects of the gameplay to me that actually feel unfinished. For example, For example, there's this whole mother base system. Okay, everybody can basically figure out what open world on the ground means, tackling bases and everything. But there's this other aspect of the game that I guess is very reminiscent of what people used to be able to do at Peace Walker, based on what I understand, is that you have to build a mother base, and it sort of feels like a mini game inside of your main game. When you start at the beginning of the game, you have a very small base, and as you go through the game, you will acquire money. You will have to obtain resources such as fuel and metals and various things such as that nature. And once you accumulate enough, then you can build other platforms to make your mother base get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the bigger that your mother base gets and the more platforms you develop, such as medical, research and development, and so on and so forth, then that leads you to be able to have more items that you can buy to use out in the field, which become very handy later down the road. The problem is that I don't see much of a point to a lot of the decisions that they've made with this mother base system. Like, I've just been out in the field. Part of the reason why I haven't plowed through every single mission in this game so far, the primary missions, is because I have spent so much time working on side ops and just kind of doing my thing and collecting enough materials so that I could really get a nice beefed up mother base going. So after I spend all that time gathering all that stuff, I open up my iDroid and I say, yay, I'm going to build this platform. I'm going to build the next research and development platform. And then all of a sudden it goes, kerchunk, you have to wait an hour and a half before the platform is complete. The thing that just screams to me is, why? The first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is it's got to be some kind of microtransaction bullshit, right? But it's not. There's no way for you to use not that I would ever do it. That's not what I'm saying. But it just seems kind of weird that there's this arbitrary, lengthy time limit, mind you, that you spend all this in-game time and it just doesn't translate very well to having the game then tell you you have to wait another hour and a half. It seems very microtransaction-y, like they want me to spend money to say, if you would like this to be complete right now, please give us $2.99 and this base will be available to you immediately.
There is a system like that. There is because there's the FOB stuff where like you buy with real money the mother base coins. So you build an extra base, and it's supposed to accelerate that stuff faster. I'll say, I don't mean to like interrupt or interject. I will say quickly, it's just like if that game wasn't disrespecting my time, in which like if you want to insert that, fine. Like you want to make me wait an hour for like a sniper rifle to be developed, okay. Let that time at least go by when I put my damn PlayStation to rest. Or something. I think I honestly wouldn't have minded that crap so much if you just let me walk away from it and let the game do its thing internally. I don't know why. Like sometimes I'm just done. Like I'm done playing this fucking game. And I just I want to build a base and I want to build my stupid guns and all that nonsense. Well, let me do that when I put this game to rest. It's just, ugh.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've had numerous Skype conversations privately with Gabe where I have said the exact same fucking thing. I said, not only does this reek of sort of like a mobile game sort of implementation, even though they don't let you, as you brought up, the FOB style bases, those are something that's more or less online and other people can sort of infiltrate or attack your base. But I'm talking even just the main platform that you use throughout the primary campaign that nobody else can actually really touch. And it still seems weird to me, but...
You're missing the point, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
The point is they now can say that microtransactions did not influence the gameplay. Because as you can clearly see, you have to wait even in the single player without microtransactions. So, hey, we're clean.
Yeah, well, that's part of the unfinished feeling that I'm getting.
Video games.
Because part of the thing is that I feel like this whole thing was designed around the idea to sell you speedier access to this shit in the primary game. Now, of course, we're going to go into controversy territory over this because, again, we don't really know what happened between Kojima and Konami. But was this something that Konami was really, really pushing really hard to have this game very microtransaction heavy from very early on, and Kojima just wouldn't do it? I don't know. But either way, the only other way that I can try and justify the arbitrary time limits for everything is that maybe they don't want people like me to go around in the early part of the game and gather up materials and then sort of turn the game into super easy mode. Because somebody like me could go around and build up their mother base and get access to all the weapons that maybe they shouldn't have until later in the game, and then plow through the campaign. At least this way, the game forces you to actually spend time in the game without getting too far ahead of yourself. But I still think it feels bullshitty.
No, because it forces you anyway, because sometimes you need the specialists that you cannot get until certain story mission. So I wasn't kidding. I really believe it's their ass cover, the waiting time. It was to be frank, it was already in Peace Walker, where you built something and then, but it wasn't time. It was missions. Like some stuff is going to be ready when you complete 1-2 missions. Okay.
But so that makes sense.
Okay. Well, no. To me, it still didn't make sense. To me, what makes sense is that, as you said, the time that I'm waiting is the time that I'm actually using in order to have the resources or the staff or whatever it is to build something. And then when I spent that time gathering resources and staff and whatnot, let me have my fucking reward. Like it's really so that simple.
Especially some of the wait times in general. As I said, there's an hour and a half. There's platforms that I'm building out.
There's 24 hours. There's 20 fucking
nukes,
hours.
Yeah. To build nukes, it takes.
I left my PS4 on for a day without touching it.
You better get some new thermal paste, my friend.
Yeah.
It is, and that's really what sort of bothers me. And another thing about the whole mother base thing is that there gets to be a point in the game, because you have this Fulton balloon system in the game. Okay, you can go up to unsuspecting enemies. Hopefully, you're intelligent enough to knock them out before you Fulton them, so that you don't alert everyone to your presence. But you can strap a balloon to someone, and they go, and a helicopter swings by and picks them up and takes them to the mother base and recruits them to Big Boss's army, basically, and then they're yours to put somewhere in the base or be part of your combat deployment unit. But also animals. For some reason, you're able to extract animals in the game, and at some point, you get a special mother base platform disconnected from your primary one that you have, where you could have all the animals that you zip away and house them.
Why?
Exactly. Why? At no point in the game does this feel like something that was necessary to do. What, just so you could go and, hello, here's my virtual petting zoo in Metal Gear Solid 5. Thank you, Kojima. You're a fucking artist.
No, I gotta be honest, and I'm gonna be ashamed of myself, but the first time that I saw a goat, okay, not what you think, motherfuckers. The first time that I saw a goat,
you were dreaming of pushing it while it was hanging over the side of a cliff?
No. I was thinking, okay, so army and secret stuff and whatnot. Kojima is so fucked up that he's gonna have a scene like The Man Who Stared at Goats. You know the movie? Have you
yes,
seen it?
I'm familiar with the movie, and
I was hoping for something funny.
You're part of the problem in all of this, Gabe. People like you Because
know.
these with all the conspiracy theories and everything that's been going back and forth about what's happening and what's not happening, and the game is feeling incomplete. This can't really be the end of Metal Gear Solid, can it? Everybody is really hanging on to the hope that more is coming. And Gabe, I'm here to tell people like you, it ain't coming. This is it.
I know. No, but it's not our fault, though. I mean, Kojima got us used to the attention to detail. He's a fucking maniac, and this is just fucking sloppy as far as narrative goes. Like, really fucking sloppy.
Not even just getting you used to this really wild sort of narrative for a game, but even in marketing techniques. I mean, it's not above Kojima to think, hey, maybe I'll just leave a whole fucking chunk of my game out, and on September 21st, which is Peace Day, say, hey, here's the finale of the game because now it's Peace Day.
Yeah.
That's so annoying. That's why That's why I've played Metal Gear games since the NES one, but
which was a terrible game, by the way. I'm sorry, I just had to say it.
No, it's fine. No, NES games a lot Metal Gear is the Nintendo one is borderline unplayable. But my larger point is that that's why I can never buy into the Kojima cult of personality, because it's just trolling. I'd never thought there was some kind of secret manic genius behind it. It's just obnoxious. Last year or 2 years ago, remember that when Jeff Keighley had that video and it had that dude banned, Joaquin Malgrin? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah.
This dude bandaged. That's the kind of nonsense. It's okay, it's fun for a while. And then when I see people actually is this dude CG or Team Real and all that stuff, and it's I can have fun with it, but when I start to see people actually thinking wow, this dude is like the way they planned everything on Lost, except they didn't. Kojima is Lost personified. He told you he has a plan, and you know what? They just made it up as he went along. That's Hideo Kojima in a nutshell to me.
That is a really good sort of analogy that you made there, comparing that to Lost. That is fantastic, and I'll tell you, even a much more recent one, and the level of depth. I bought into this thing, and I'm not even a very huge Metal Gear Solid fan. I really loved Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1. I enjoyed what I played in Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4 as well, but it's never been one of my top franchises. But I bought into this shit for 2 minutes this year. Basically, there was that whole thing where I think back in May there was a website that went live, and nobody really knew what it was, but when they looked at the coding for this website, it kind of hinted at maybe being something related to Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Now, of course, now that the game has been out, there's the collector's edition, which details what some of that cut content from the game was. It was from a chapter 56 or something like that.
51. Mission 51.
Mission 51. And they showed what the ending of the game would have been at that point. And at the very end of the credits or something, or during the credits, there's a picture of New York City with the two towers, the World Trade Center, standing there. So everybody's like, oh my God, they started linking that with this website, which had a countdown timer for 9/11, okay? So they're like, oh my God, this thing's been around since May. How would a troll know how to link this to something related to New York that everybody sort of identifies with it now because of a very tragic moment in history? It's right up Kojima's alley to kind of go to that place and use it for his story. We're going to get something on 9/11 once this clock countdown ends. And it ended up being a big troll because once the countdown ended, we just got a bunch of images of PT, basically, and then that was it. Now when you visit the website, at least the last that I checked, basically it just shows your IP address on the screen, and that's it. But it turned out to be a big hoax, but everybody on the internet, me included, was really anxious to see what was going to happen. I should have known better, of course. And I kind of did deep inside, and I got to a point where I was just like, well, maybe, just maybe. But yeah, people are freaking bananas in regards to this franchise. And Kojima helped breed this sort of culture, which is both great, but really sort of, I guess, almost irresponsible at the same time, considering what it has wrought.
That's a good word. That's a good word. That's irresponsible.
It's a diplomatic word. So, yeah, open world is good. The mother base stuff is really. I don't really see a whole lot of point to it. Another thing that I do want to mention about that is that you have to manage. You don't really have to. The game doesn't really penalize you too much if you don't, but you have to manage, it wants you to manage staff morale, which means you have to go around, like if you build like 6 different platforms, and I'm telling you, these platforms, they're not close together. If you get in a Jeep from your primary middle point of Mother Base, and you drive down an arm of this base down to the other platform, takes you like 2 minutes to drive in real world time to actually get there. Which, it doesn't sound like a long time, but it feels like a long time when you're doing it. You have to like bump into every single one of those guards that you have on your base individually in order to get their morale up. And it just seems like another arbitrary minigame type bullshit thing for you to do that doesn't really make any damn bit of difference to the game. Because I can just go out into the field in the open world environment and just balloon me up another A-class guy instead of watching this one like try and give all my other. Because what happens is these guys, they get a little discontent, they start causing trouble. You don't actually see any of this happen on base, which is something, another missed opportunity, but they'll cause PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, with other members on base. They put them into sick bay, basically, and then you have to wait for their recovery time to recoup before they can join back in action. And there's a lot of like hints that I've seen online, like, you want to know how to keep a troublemaker in line? Put another troublemaker in line with them, and then they sort of keep each other entertained. And I'm fuck that.
I never understood that explanation. I mean, it made sense for me to put diplomats.
You know what? This whole thing, what you might just hold described, that is Metal Gear to me in a nutshell, this game, because it's my thought. It's like I think that the mother base inherently is a good idea, right? Like, I mean, I like it in theory, because that whole thing, I'm essentially turning it into the world's deadliest NFL draft, where like I'm just picking top soldiers, recruiting them, and then like amass an army. Like, who doesn't want to do that in that context? But it doesn't go anywhere. And you know, like, when you have a concept of, oh, these guys have different personalities, that could be something interesting too. But ultimately,
there was a concept like that in Ground Zeroes, actually.
Yeah, but ultimately none of it pays off, and that's the problem with the game overall for me. But you know, like, it's because, you know, it wants to like get you thinking like every guy you recruit has some sort of personality. Like, one's a troublemaker, another's a diplomat. This guy is really good with the grenade launchers, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, the way you have to kind of micromanage it, it's not fun at all. Like, or it's barely fun, and you don't really feel like there's payoff to it in the end, at least as far as I've gotten, I'll just say.
There really isn't, because my level of involvement, whenever I get anybody on my base, what I do is they sort of enter this holding cell period very, very briefly, and then once they come out of it, they're like in your ranks. So I go to my list of everybody on my staff, and I have the list sort of situated so that I can see who the newest recruits are versus the older ones. And I just kind of look through the new people that I just had join my army on Mother Base, and if I see any of them as a troublemaker, I fire them immediately, and that's the last that I see of them. And then what I do is you have an option to sort of massage where everybody goes, whether they're going to be in research and development, in medical, in communications, or wherever. Intel, rather. That's what I mean by communications, rather. And you can kind of place them where you want to be the most effective, but every single time, I just take the easy way out that takes me 2 seconds. I just say, assign all staff for me, and then boom, it's done, and then I'm out of the menu. The whole process for me takes like no more than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's all it needs.
And and still, there's no payoff. Like, no, I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, like the way you're doing it. In fact, that's exactly why I feel like there's no real payoff, because why even micromanage? A, if you can auto assign anyway, but B, like, you know, maybe the payoff is like you get better weapons and all that essentially, but you know, like, you can develop better weapons, and this game is like play, you know, experiment, but really, like, you're gonna want to just go all trank anyway, like no matter what, all tranquilizer. I mean, and it's a weird conflict of ideas. That's the problem.
It's completely consequential. You have no attachment whatsoever with the troops. They do nothing when you go to Mother Base. They are just walking around and they salute you, and like there's no connection. And I'm mentioning this because any of you guys played, I don't know if you guys finished the game or not, so are we gonna go spoiler free? Like,
for people watching, I do want to try and remain spoiler free. I think we can maybe allude to certain things. I don't really have an issue with that, but I don't want to be like, oh, well, so and so did blah blah blah.
Okay, so anyway, there's a particular mission 46, that specifically because you don't build connections with any of these guys, it could have been a very fucking powerful mission, and it's not. It fucking falls flat.
Yep.
Something happens that it's supposed to make you feel bad. I didn't feel bad for 1 second. I was just like, I know what it's trying to do, but it's so fucking forced. It's trying so hard to make me feel bad that it doesn't even understand that I'm already in another place. Like, I really don't give a fuck. So yeah, it's one of those missed opportunities, and I can't say I'm sure because I'm not Kojima, but there's so many traces of good ideas that I'm convinced that this game did not come out in the way it was supposed to come out.
Yeah, and it's not only that impactful moment in the game. This whole game is founded on the idea of making you want to try and establish connections with people or things, and it just never materializes. There's a whole component to the gameplay built around it. The buddy system, okay? Throughout the course of the game, first you have your horse. And the idea is the more time that you spend and utilize your buddies out in the field, the more commands you are able to give to them so that they can be more useful to you out in the field. The horse, after you're with him for a while, for example, you can command your horse to take a dump on command. So you can poop right in the middle of the road, it causes a vehicle to swerve, gives you a good opportunity to do something there. Then you have a dog, and the dog you could give more commands to so that you could say, wait, sit here, you can go off somewhere, and then tell your dog to bark so that it can be a distraction and get guards away from you. And then you come to this character, Quiet. And of course we've heard a lot about Quiet prior to the game's release. And the same sort of thing. You go through the game, and the game is really trying to make you establish some sort of connection with her that just never turns into anything. And the only real connection that you have with any of these things, and they're supposed to be your buddies, your pals, your friends, you're supposed to form a bond with them. And as we already said earlier, there are certain parts of the game, like in Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, where they really go above and beyond trying to make you feel what's happening. So I have no doubt in my mind that this buddy system was supposed to be some sort of bond between the gamer, not just Big Boss, but the gamer and the buddy on screen. And it just doesn't happen. Quiet, obviously, she had a lot going on for her controversy-wise before the game released because of her boobies hanging out all the time.
You'll be ashamed of your words and deeds, I believe, was the phrase.
That is exactly what Kojima said. And if not
God.
word for word, that is exactly what he said. And the only real connection that I have with her is taking her out on missions just so I can get the buddy meter up, because there's a buddy meter, and the longer that you spend out in the field with your buddies, the more marks you get up on your meter, and then once it's full, like they can do like all the commands they're supposed to be able to do. That's the only real connection I have with her, other than her sort of trying to molest me on the helicopter.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I gotta go into spoiler here. So, because it's not even a spoiler, it's something that just gets people mad. So Quiet dies. Okay, there, I said it.
That's a pretty big fucking spoiler, Gabe.
Yeah, but you know what? People just okay. Here's why I said it, and I don't consider it a spoiler as much of a.
How does that not be considered a spoiler?
No, I'm telling you why. Because
okay.
Remember, when I'm gonna mention something that everybody knows. Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, she dies too, right?
I'm done here. Goodbye.
Okay. So people cried on the forums, and it was super fucking sad and whatnot. Quiet dies. People go in forums. They don't cry. They bitch because why the fuck did she leave? Why the fuck did she die? And I don't have the sniper anymore now. So they don't give a fuck about Quiet. They do give a fuck about the sniper. They give a fuck about the turret, the headshotting turret.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that already, to me, that speaks volumes to how badly that motherfucking character is written. Like it's really.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's just childish or I don't know. I have my theory that I'm not gonna share because you guys are gonna call me nuts just because everybody does. But it's really embarrassing. Anyway.
And now you have to share that with us, especially.
Why? You know it already.
You just gave a major fucking spoiler, so now you're bound to sharing this opinion that you don't want to share. Spit it out.
You can't say I have a crazy theory and then you hold back. That's not how that works.
Especially when you're doing an internet show. I have a secret, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
I
don't.
I can't say. Sorry.
It's bullshit.
It's interesting radio right there, motherfucker.
It's my stupid mind. It ties back to when we were talking conspiracies and whatnot. I really believe she was supposed to be Chico.
Chico, right? That's not the first time I heard that. Yeah.
It's like people dismiss it when I say that, but there's a lot of indications that it could have been an idea that they toyed with. First of all, Chico in Ground Zeroes is built up as being super fucking important, and there's this misery of the Jack in his heart and whatnot. And in the Phantom Pain, like, he's gone, and you don't even know where the fuck he's gone unless you listen very carefully to every tape. And in one tape, they say, "Yeah, fucker's dead." Basically, that's how they treat him. And oh my God, I have to go onto the parasites now to explain this. The parasites, they have some sort of, not a cure, but well, let's call it a cure for simplicity. That basically what it does, it turns the male parasites into female parasites. And there's a scene in the helicopter in which Code Talker says it doesn't only affect the parasites, it affects the host. But then he goes and says it makes it infertile. Is that the word?
Yeah, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. I think he said
okay. But it seems like tacked on, and even in the cassette tapes, they mention it so many times: male to female, male to female, male to female, up until a point in which Ocelot has to ask, "Does it happen to humans too?" And Code Talker goes, it happens only to predisposed organisms. Like, oh my God, I can't shake it off my mind that they wanted they wanted to pull something like that, and it would make sense with everything, with what Kojima said, with the Taboo team, and it would have been awesome. I mean, I can only imagine all the kids jerking off to Quiet just to discover it was a man. It would be amazing.
But the thing is, though, even if that held true, like they stuck with that characterization, it wouldn't have paid off because nothing pays off with Quiet. And I really do want to go on record, and I think you put it very well earlier in that I don't give a shit about Quiet, but I care more about having her picking dudes off heads like when I need a base cleared or I need guys to Fulton because dude, like it's. And you know what? I'll get into it, man. Like all that discussion about like her sexuality and all that nonsense, like it's terrible. Like it's a shitty design, and you don't do anything with it. Just like I wish Kojima would just own up to the fact that this is like a fan service nonsense. And you know what? Also, like, and not to get like preachy or on a soapbox, but even I don't know if you guys remember the one mission where you had to fight the Zoff sniper chicks.
The skulls, the female skulls.
And then like the way they're introduced, and it's like a TNA shot, and it's like, like no fucking respect for me, like as an adult male, because you know what the demographic is for this game. No way Kojima doesn't have data on game sales and all that nonsense at Konami. Like, come on, man, like just give me some credit, please. Like,
I gotta be honest on this. I don't give a shit about the looks or the design. Like, the fact that Quiet has her boobs out doesn't bother me in the least. Like,
it doesn't bother me either.
And same for the skulls. Like, I noticed that it bothers much more Americans than Europeans, the people that I talk to, at least. So I don't know if it's some cultural difference.
It's not about that she has boobs or that they show it, but it's like there's no purpose to Quiet.
Oh, absolutely, there's not. But the one thing that bothers everyone in equal part, or at least almost everyone, is how she acts in the helicopter. Like that's like 5 minutes from the cheapest hooker in Tijuana. I mean, what the fuck is that?
She basically does everything except drop on her knees and start giving you a blowjob. I mean, she puts her ass up in your face. She lays down so you get a perfect shot of her body looking almost naked.
Kojima animated her, the model, like showering and like fucking splashing around like and shit. And it's like, what the fuck am I watching here, man?
That's the thing. Like, I understand that fan service exists, and I expect it to be in a lot of different things because...
Like, I get it, dude. Just put it to good use, man. Or just, like, I don't know, be subtle about it, maybe? Like,
I would rather be...
I'm not even trying to be on that level of, like, internet outrage. That's not what I'm trying to do here, but it's just, like, I just want some credit. Like, I just want to be, just respect me as a player, man. That's it, really. And it's like this is a weird thing. That's it. Like it's just weird. And then like, I can keep going. You know what I mean?
Because for me, it's not even so much the fact that it's not really trying to do something a bit more intelligent with it or a bit more subtle with it. The fact that's even more insulting is the fact that Kojima came straight out and said, "You guys are going to be
for cosplay. Like, this is just a cosplay outfit I made."
Right. He's like, "You're going to be ashamed once you understand why she's dressed that way."
Like, kiss my ass. And the reason for her design too, and it's weak sauce, man. Like,
you know what's
and that's just another example of narrative-wise how empty this game feels.
Almost as empty as the plastic doll of Quiet that has the squishable boobs.
Jesus.
The worst part is that it actually harms the narrative, because have you all seen the infamous rain scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so try watching it again, but start from the middle. It's actually quite cute. If you take away the whole fucking first part, it would have worked. Like, yeah, even if she's naked, basically, but it would have worked. It's cute. the first part is lewd, man. It's like, what the fuck am I watching?
What are we doing?
It's on fucking Pornhub. Can you believe that shit?
It's a stripper in a wet t-shirt contest, basically. That's basically what it amounts to before there is a cute scene. But that's the whole thing about
when you say it's a cute scene. Like it's like a weird moment of a weird affection that you kind of see throughout the game. Like if you spend enough time with Quiet as a buddy, like there's this weird affection kind of that she has for Big Boss, and I get where you're coming from with that. But yeah, then it's like a little weird before that. It's just like,
oh my god, yeah.
But that's really the only point in the entire game that you really feel like you're supposed to feel anything for this character.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just like in the chapter, here's my tits in your face.
Yeah.
Like that's.
Milkshake to boys in the yard or whatever.
Watch her nay.
Oh man.
I don't even know what the fuck that means. Anybody want to help me out with that one?
That's a dance.
I have no clue.
I don't know why I know that. It's like watch me whip, watch me nay nay. I don't know why I know that.
Yeah.
But I do.
Awesome Gabe over in Italy. I said the other day I sent him a meme. It was a Halloween one with Michael Myers, and they posted a screenshot of the video saying, "Watch me whip, watch me nay nay," and then there's Michael Myers, "Watch me stab you in the fucking face." So I sent it to him, and he's like, I don't know what the fuck this is. And I'm like, you are such a lucky sheltered man, but here's a link to the video anyway, so you can endure the same fucking pain that I've been going through.
I don't pay attention to what's popular in that field, and I'm grateful for that, actually.
You should be. But I'm married to a woman who listens to the radio, so I hear this stuff.
So it's like really big and really popular outside of YouTube. Like it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Okay.
Kinda.
Wow.
Unfortunately, for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
It will be. But yeah. So with Quiet, as Gus said, I wish Kojima would have just fessed up and been like, yeah, I just wanted some titties in there.
I mean, he's done it before. I mean, just I don't know what now. I know the climate is different, like the discussion of it, but like just own up to it, man. That's all.
And it's not just female bodies. I mean, he's really shown off male bodies before too. He doesn't really seem to, just throw women on the chopping block as far as shamelessly putting them out on display like that. And me, I'm a heterosexual male, and I like what I see, and I think she's cute and everything, and I have to watch on the helicopter, so I'm not going to complain, but at the same time, I can look at it and objectively say, what fucking purpose does this serve in the overall grand scheme of things? It serves absolutely nothing. And that's a big problem with the game, because you brought up...
either, because he made one of my favorite female characters, the Boss, man. Boss is one of my favorite game characters ever. And it's just I wish I wish this game had a character like the Boss, man. And the closest to that are all the females that you recruit, that you can send on missions and all that, you can play as and all that.
I'm gonna one-up you on that, because actually I think my favorite female is Eva in Metal Gear Solid 3. And she is very sexual, but it has a fucking purpose.
And she uses it.
It's a weapon, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's done so well. Oh my god.
She plays Big Boss like a damn fiddle.
She plays everyone, man.
Like a damn fiddle.
Now about the character Boss, originally Boss was supposed to be in this game. Just a little more of that cut content for you.
She kind of is, right? Because the other day I was playing and I walked. I don't know if you guys did the mission where you you Fulton, that AI pod thing.
Yeah.
And all I kept seeing in the captioning was Jack, some stuff, and I'm like, is that the Boss talking? I don't know what was going on. That was the closest I think I saw.
Dude, it's so fucking wasted. It's gonna be a witness in a fucking trial. Seriously. I'm not joking. It's, oh my god. No, the writing, guys, it's really bad. And I don't think it's as intended. I know it sounds like I'm defending this shit, and maybe part of me is because it's my favorite franchise ever. I started playing it in '87 when I was fucking 7 years old. But the thing is, it's so all over the place. It contradicts itself every 2 minutes. Like, I'm going to make you an example. You guys met Code Talker, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a tape in which Ocelot asks him, how does the infection spread of the parasites, right? Because language activates the parasites, but it's not how it spreads, which is something I've seen a lot of people get wrong, because they actually explain how it spreads, and they say it's droplet infection, which means the parasite travel by basically water or saliva or whatever. If I drink in your glass, I'm going to give you the parasites, okay? It's as simple as that. And the first time you meet Code Talker, like, he doesn't know if you have or not the parasites, and he sucks on, he does have parasites. He sucks on his pipe, and then he gives it to you, saying, hey, here's the cure for the parasite. Like, I'm there, like, are you stupid, motherfucker? Like, you're telling me, hey, here's a cure for the stuff that you're gonna get by sucking on the cure. Like, it's so fucking, I guess he just wanted his pipe to be sucked. I don't know.
That's a heck of a way of interpreting it. I mean, anything goes with this goddamn game.
And even Quiet at the end in her scene, she goes, "I didn't choose to be quiet," and I was screaming at the TV. I'm like, bullshit! You clearly did, because you can talk and you can speak any other language that is not English. So it's just, oh my god.
So the general consensus here that we have is that narratively, this game is really, really just not there. And
literally, in some places, literally, because I'm sorry, I don't even interject like that. It's just like, if we go into, it's like Skullface, like, and I kept wondering too. Once at the end of chapter 1, does anything else happen with Skullface? And it's funny when Mike was talking about those tapes in Ground Zeroes, making this Skullface guy to be like this most dangerous guy, and then it just goes nowhere.
And that's exactly why I took the time at the beginning of this podcast talking about Ground Zeroes to bring that up, and I specifically said, store that in your memory banks for later, because we're going to get to it.
Sorry if I stepped out of the topic.
No. This is exactly the point that I wanted to kind of push with that anyway, and I was just about to make that point, and you jumped right in with it, which is perfect. I mean, and let's be honest, we're just winging it here anyway, right? It's not like we have a script in front of us. With Ground Zeroes, I'm actually going to go out on a limb, and I don't feel like I'm really going out. I feel like Ground Zeroes was much better story-wise, even though it was just a prologue and didn't have much story, than Phantom Pain is.
I agree.
It's because it sets everything up perfectly. If you find these tapes, you're supposed to get the idea. Even if you don't find all the extra tapes, you know that some pretty horrible shit has happened at Camp Omega. You find Chico, he's listening to the tape of Kaz being tortured, right? And you know it sounds really bad. Like, you're supposed to feel animosity for this guy. You're supposed to feel that he is such a horrible villain that you'll do whatever it takes in Phantom Pain in order to get your revenge on this guy. And then, it sets it up so perfectly, and then you go into Phantom Pain, and you get a glimpse of Skullface here and there, and then all of a sudden, poof, he's out of the mix, and you're like, is that it? And then, you come into contact with Kaz, and you're like, what's the point of her being here? And throughout most of the game, it's absolutely nothing. It just seems like another almost dead end.
Kaz is the fucking worst, by the way. Just want to throw that in there.
She has that stereotypical Jap anime girl voice, right?
Oh, you mean Paz?
It's not
Paz.
even
I'm sorry.
Voice.
You're right. I don't mean Kaz. I mean Paz.
Oh, Paz? Paz is no. Come to Kaz Miller, dude. That I wanted to kick that dude off the base like so bad, so many times, man. Because he's a whiny teenager. He's the worst. I hate him.
He really is. And I never really got that vibe from him back in the day when you're, listening to him through the codec and everything in Metal Gear Solid, like
whiny fucker, like.
I'm sorry.
I do.
I'm
I feel
sorry
like,
because I like them in this game. It's the only character that I actually like.
Because there's depth to him, at least. Being a whiny asshole, depth, I guess, maybe.
It's because, I mean, at least he's a fucking destroyed man, and I can
true.
tell that he's got an arc to himself. The
That's
other ones are like, and plus there was something else with Kaz that could be already another case of cut content. There's a scene that I encountered with Code Talker. I went back to Mother Base. There was Code Talker on his wheelchair, looking at nothing and just mumbling shit. And all the parasites around him were all like, blah, 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 and he was like, Kazuhira Miller eyes, blah blah blah. Like, it was almost remote viewing what Miller was seeing. I don't know. It was so fucking weird, and it led nowhere. Like, that's it. He goes away with his wheelchair. I don't know.
Phantom Pain in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. It goes fucking nowhere.
Oh, and Paz. By the way, speaking of Paz, I have a friend that is playing Phantom Pain, and man, I couldn't understand how fucked up it would be for a guy that is not into Metal Gear at all. Because I played every single Metal Gear, so obviously I played Peace Walker and Ground Zeroes before this one, but he has no idea who Paz is. So he was asking me, okay, should I feel bad for this girl? Because he found her in the medical bay, and he started asking me questions.
Oh, he didn't even play Ground Zeroes, huh?
No, he didn't play anything. Oh. And so I was like, well, because he was like, I kind of feel bad. Who's this girl? She's cute. Is she the daughter of someone? I'm like, no, she's actually not a minor. She's a fucking spy, cutthroat, and whatnot. She actually made your helicopter explode because she was captured, and Skullface and blah blah.
And
blah.
Before that, she was one of the most important characters in Peace Walker.
Yeah, for whatever fucking reason, because she had no place in that game either. But whatever.
But she had a lot more to do with that plot, and you knew a lot more about her in Peace Walker.
Yeah, well, her plot is that she's programmed mentally to be the perfect spy because she looks innocent. That's all her fucking plot.
Well, when you break it down like that, geez.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, and it's the same here because you have the cassette tapes with Zero and her that they actually did meet before. I guess before Peace Walker.
I do have one question. I guess.
No, before Ground Zeroes. Go on.
What do you like? What did you guys think in general of how they pretty much implemented the whole story as cassette tapes in Phantom Pain?
I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm not really for that either, because part of the problem with that whole conversation in regards to this game for me is that Kojima, up until this point, or at least the Metal Gear Solid franchise in general, has been really, really, really good, at least as far as an entertaining ride, because there's been so much story that weaves in and out of the actual gameplay, because the games before this one, minus Ground Zeroes, of course, were all very, very linear. So he was able to tell whatever story he wanted by leading you from point A to point B, cutscene, point B to point C, cutscene, sometimes an hour and a half cutscene. And the story was there. Now, over a year ago, like a year and a month or something like that, obviously Destiny came out. And I complained up and down about Destiny, and I'll continue to complain about it until I die, because it was released without anything going for it as far as a story. There was a campaign, took you about 8 hours to play through, nothing. But everybody's like, oh, but the lore is so awesome. You have to go on your little doodad here, and you got to go to the application, and you have to read the grimoire card.
You got to talk to your son, apparently, like about the story.
I'm like, you gotta look up the Grimoire cards, and okay, it's not in the game. You could argue with Phantom Pain that, okay, there's a lot more story actually in the game because you can find these cassette tapes and listen to them. But it's still a sore point with me because you know what? You're not going to come across every single one of these cassette tapes unless you find tooth and comb for them throughout the entire game. And you can miss a lot of that important stuff. And not only that, but there are a lot of cassette tapes. How many people really just want to sit down one time before they start launching in the missions and say, I'm going to sit back for about a half an hour and just listen to some of these cassette tapes? Yeah, I don't see it happening, so it's a sore spot with me.
It reminded me of what I really disliked about Final Fantasy 13, or one of the things, is that in order to really understand the lore in that game's particular world, you had to go into the menu and start reading through the I think it was called the Crystarium or whatever. Like, you wouldn't understand what the hell the difference between Lassie and Falsey was unless you went into the pause menu and just started reading away. And I think it was weird because part of it, sometimes the tapes in Metal Gear games are like entertaining in its own stupid Metal Gear way. Like if you listen to those hamburger tapes.
Oh my God! Please, Gus, please, because you know how we just described Kaz, right?
Yeah.
The destroyed fucking man that he just
who has a
shits on
McDonald's
humanity and then goes into hamburgers like all happy, and what the fuck is that?
What are we doing with this
guy? It's complete shit. And you know, I listened to all the fucking tapes because of course I did. And yeah, I have 200 hours on the game, and I believe at least 50 are between building shit and listening to tapes. Like,
holy
not playing.
Shit.
God.
Not playing. And there's just so many times that I can hear Code Talker say, "Well, Bakia." Like, I'm tired as fuck of it.
We take from nature and give from nature buns and nonsense.
And male to female copulation. Boy.
Hamburgers. This is
There's a lot of games that have this sort of backstory thing that goes on to add to the lore of the world. It's not just this game. It's not just Destiny. But the only game that I personally was ever really interested in listening to any of that side stuff with was Batman Arkham Asylum, not Arkham City, before it got so bloated and uninteresting that I didn't really care anymore. But Arkham Asylum, there were these actual like tapes with like police or counselors, you know, interviewing the main inmates from Arkham Asylum, and it was really interesting to listen to these characters because they were so well acted, and those interviews were so well written too. Like, it was creepy listening to them. You were actually feeling fear just listening to these tapes. You know,
they weren't wasting your time, and it tied into the actual narrative well.
It did, and not many games that like decide to just throw a bunch of lore, like, you know, Skyrim, you know, any of those Elder Scroll games. There's so much story about lore, you know, in about the bajillion books that you find laying throughout those worlds.
Yeah.
You can read them if you want to take the time. And The Witcher is the same exact way. I don't take any time to read any of that shit. I'm just not that kind of... There's enough content in these games nowadays that I can't be bothered to do that.
You just touched on the exact thing I was thinking. It's that the way game narratives are presented, you don't really... It's not like it was in the 80s where like you read through the manual to get the story, and then it just left it up to your imagination. You're already making these cinematic experiences that can just explain your whole damn universe in the opening cutscene, because you're already making me sit through it anyway before I can even play the game. Like, it's weird to me that games still do that today. This weird like backstory that you only find if you read the right piece of literature.
I enjoy that part. I'm not sure why, but I am one of those guys that read the books and whatnot. Yeah, I do that in The Witcher, in Skyrim. I do that in the Souls games. Fuck, I read every item description that I
find.
Souls
games are different because at least like because you're not beaten over the head with narrative in the actual gameplay. So
but so is Phantom Pain though. So that's where I feel weird, because Phantom Pain has no narrative whatsoever during the gameplay. So you're gonna think, well, it's clearly intended to be show, don't tell. But no, because they fucking tell hours and hours of cassette tapes. So it's so weird.
You got a point there. But there's a difference, I think, between Dark Souls, which is a game that's very much just, run, shield, hack slash shield, and you work your way through the game. The item descriptions are really the only way that you get lore for that game. Where with Phantom Pain, it was obviously, especially considering the history of Metal Gear Solid games in general, where they are so overbloated with shit that you don't even know what's going on half the time. If you're certain gamers, at least, anyway. I'm one of those people. Mm-hmm. I know, Gabe, you know everything there is to know inside and out. I'm not one of those people. Even if I played every single second of every single Metal Gear game, I wouldn't be able to retain all that information and be able to piece it all together, except for the general idea of the overarching plot and the characters and everything. Phantom Pain obviously was striving, based on everything that we were saying before. There's so much that it wants to do. There's so much that it was trying to set up to do. There's obviously cut content from this. The story's supposed to be there. I almost feel like that all of these tapes are almost sort of a way to make up for the lack of content because of development issues. And that's sort of the next thing that I kind of want to get into. Do you want to comment if you agree or disagree on that first before I move on?
I just want to say one thing before you change topic, you change subject. The thing that pisses me off the most from a fan point of view, from a rabid fan point of view, is that this game was set... Okay, two things. The first is that it was promised to be the missing link, and it's a fucking side story. Because, as a matter of fact, you can take this one and Peace Walker out of the timeline, and the chain still works perfectly. It actually works better, all right? The second thing is that from a time frame perspective, this game is set in the only motherfucking time frame in which every motherfucker exists, okay? Liquid, Solid, Big Boss, Ocelot, Sniper Wolf, Grey Fox, now Naomi. Every single one exists, and there's none. And that's not the way I would have wanted Metal Gear to go out. And I know that 4 got a lot of criticism for wanting to include everything in it. But here, the opportunity, I think it was different, because fans like me, we had a lot of we still have, actually, a lot of questions, especially Frank Jaeger, Grey Fox, especially Sniper Wolf, like people that we genuinely cared about and that we never seen. Solidus. And they could have been here. Like, the time frame was perfect. And no, fuck it. We got a side story. And oh, I gotta mention this. I'm sorry, spoiler, guys. So at the end, in the ending that I described, the perfect aftershave commercial in my editorial, you see basically a certain character leveling with you and saying and telling you, "Hey, dude, we are the same. We are like It's not. I'm not great. We are great." I'm
Tyler
trying to.
Durden.
What?
And the Tyler Durden, it's like Tyler Durden, pretty much. Like,
yeah, I'm trying to keep it as spoiler-free as I can.
So, you already gave one. You already said one huge spoiler earlier. You may as well.
Okay. So Big Boss tells you, "Hey, yeah, you're not Big Boss, but yet you are Big Boss. We are on the same level, man. Like, we are totally bros." And next thing, after the fucking credits, you get the post credits conversation in which Ocelot basically shits on you because, yeah, we've been doing this here, but hey, Big Boss over there is building a fucking nation, not shit like this. So you're like, why the fuck did you have to go and say and tell me we were the same if Ocelot is gonna shit on this at the very end of the game? Like, what? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. The problem with this game, and it's something that we've been tiptoeing around, I think, in our conversation for a bit, without actually coming out and saying it, but Gabe just did. It's that this story doesn't feel like it needed to be told.
Yeah.
Period.
Boom.
I mean, it doesn't feel like it had any play. It just feels like it was wedged in there just because. And if you take it out, it still doesn't matter. You're still not missing anything.
It's like I joked earlier about how when I said that it seemed like ever since the second Metal Gear Solid that Kojima was like, this was my last one. But this game felt like he did not. It's weird because there are so many things about it where it's like this guy put passion, this team put real passion into this game, and then it's stuff like that where it's like they did not want to make this game at all.
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier, Gus, that one of the things that you really appreciate about the gameplay aspect of this game is that there's so many fine details that really elevate this above anything else. For example, one thing that I don't expect to see is that one of the tools that you have at your disposal as Snake is that you have a deployment balloon that sort of looks like yourself. You can toss it out somewhere, and then you could have it go poof, and there you go. You have your own soldier that acts as a distraction while you sneak around. And as I was going through the game, I did not expect to be going into bases and zooming in with my binoculars on dummy balloons that they had too.
Yeah.
The fact that you mentioned before that this entire game adapts to your play style. If you're a guy that goes in to do missions mostly at nighttime under the cover of dark, the enemy is going to start equipping night vision goggles like crazy and having flashlights on their weapons. If you're getting headshots with tranquilizer darts constantly, helmet time, and also if you get a lot of body shots, they're wearing body armor.
Yeah.
Right, and then you could send out your combat deployment, team in order to interrupt the delivery of that stuff, so that for like 3 seconds in the game you don't encounter that stuff. You have to rerun those missions almost constantly in order to really keep them.
If you guys can answer that, you know how like that game adapts to that kind of stuff with whether you shoot them so much that they get helmets, or et cetera, with the body shots and the armor. What if you're like explosives? What if you constantly just shoot rockets at them and throw grenades and all that? What do they like adapt to that?
That would be pretty crazy, but I'm going to say probably not without really having any knowledge of that.
The only thing that I've seen, like the ultimate protection, is the Riot
the
suit.
Heavy suits, right? The heavy suits.
Yeah, so I guess it's
I get
just
curious about that because I'm like, what if I just constantly spam them with grenades? Like, what would happen? What would they do?
I don't know. I guess tennis ball rackets to bounce them off to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of little details like that that still keep this a step above what other games are doing gameplay-wise. But, the fact that you can take all those fine little details and it's great, but the fact that this game just didn't need to be there makes that all the more disappointing. And knowing that the game really feels incomplete, I really don't know why so many video game websites out there are giving this game a complete pass. I mean, it's still up there as the top 2 somewhere in the. I go back and forth between this and Witcher 3 constantly, because I said it prior, I think probably even before Gabe joined, maybe, that objectively speaking, The Witcher 3 is like, I think, the better game this year because it's more well-rounded. It has good story. It has good characters. It makes the world come alive, and everything feels the way it's supposed to. It feels complete. The combat could be better. I don't have as much time actually running around and battling things as I do in Phantom Pain. Phantom Pain really holds the game up above everything else, and the gameplay is that good. Yeah. That's saying something. The fact that it can still make the game, in my eyes, feel like I hate assigning numbers to anything, but I'm kind of saying like maybe an 8 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10, just because of all the story shit. But like gameplay-wise, it is amazing, and it's still up there as one of the top 2 games of the year for me, and that says so much, and that's what makes all the other incomplete aspects of the game that much more disappointing. The question is, what happened?
This game is the perfect example of why I don't believe in numbers assigned at the end of a review. I couldn't. I'm not able to give it a number because oh my God, instinctively it would be 7, but then I would be like, dude, I spent 200 hours on this one. It's got to be more than a 7.
It's like how Destiny players felt before Taken King came out, where they couldn't stop playing, but they hated so much about that game.
Yeah, maybe. As for why the review were so high, I might have an explanation because this game has caused a little trouble in the editorial team. So in the September issue, there's the review that Francesco did, and he gave it a 9. And then in the October issue that is going to come out days from now, there's my big editorial in which I shit all over all over the story. Oh. So so here's the thing. Francesco went to the review event. It was a 4 days event. The way that he described it to me, the best way that I can sum it up for you guys, it's like Clockwork Orange, like sensory overload. They were basically strapped in front of the game. They had like basically 40 hours to finish it. So if I had to review it that way, I probably would have overlooked a lot of the bad stuff, because I would be like, okay, I should go back and re-listen to this tape because I'm not sure, but I can't because I don't have time. So I think there's more. Maybe it's me. Maybe. So I'm not excusing the high reviews, but it was a shitty event. It was a shitty way to handle things. And I know. So the journalistic integrity would be not reviewing it or wait for it. But then you have obligations. You have to come out because otherwise people are going to come out and you're not, and then you're left out. And so, yeah.
I think that's a very valid point, because even as someone who's not strapped to this game 24/7 and has to crank something out within 48 hours, the first couple days that I spent playing this game, it seemed flawless to me. Yeah. I mean, the opening hour of the game, which is probably the most impactful storytelling moment of the entire game overall, since it's almost entirely like cutscene with a little input from you here and there. And then once you actually get into the open world gameplay after that, and you realize how much freedom you have to tackle everything, it's like, oh my god, this is perfect. And then I played it for a few more days, and I'm still thinking it's really, really amazing. And then as you start getting into it more and more, things start to reveal themselves to you in a slightly less positive light. And that light, that bright light that you had at the beginning of the game, very, very slowly starts to dim a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And here we are. Now we're talking about it, and we're saying, where the hell is the narrative in this game? And
Gus said that after knowing what happens, it doesn't really feel like playing it anymore.
But I kept coming back to it less and less after that.
Yeah, and I can totally understand. And the reason why is this. Basically, what the game, or what Kojima tried to do, was made you feel like you were Big Boss. All right? That's the whole point of the story. Like, yeah, you did all this. And so you are it's about the idea of Big Boss more than Big Boss the person. The only problem that I have is that it wasn't me. Like, that was a character that already existed in Ground Zeroes. Yeah, and right. proof of that is that nobody, if you check the forums, like I'm on every Metal Gear forum there is, and if you check the forums, nobody says I am, or when they talk about the character, it's always, and I'm quoting, the fucking medic. All right? So when they reveal,
and you know what? I agree with you. It's I have no words for it almost. I mean, I do.
The reveal should have made you feel, oh, I am, like, it's me. And instead, everyone was like, oh, it's the fucking medic. that's a
Because he's
testament.
voiced by Kiefer too, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the problem with that. I lost the words before, but I regained them miraculously. The whole problem with this whole thing about, oh, well, you know, you could be Big Boss, anybody could be Big Boss. He already did that.
Yeah.
He did it back in Metal Gear Solid 2
Yeah.
He did it
with
better.
Raiden. He had you as Solid Snake for a little bit, and then he took it back and he gave it to Raiden. And the whole point of that was like, you know what? You don't have to be Solid Snake. Anybody could sort of fill that position. It could be even you. You know, I mean, that's what that whole thing was about. And for him to kind of Metal Gear Solid 4, even though the story wasn't like amazeballs, okay? I mean, there was a lot of story. It wasn't amazing. There was a lot of fan service, which really made it seem like, as I said earlier, Kojima's swan song and a perfect spot to end everything, since it is chronologically the end of the series. To come back, you kind of feel like if you're going to go back and have another story to tell that's in the middle of the timeline somewhere, you better goddamn well have something worth saying.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have it here, especially to come back with almost very little to no story, even though we know there's a lot of cut content, that very little to no story, and to sort of lay that same message on gamers again, that anybody can be this character. It doesn't just have to be this guy. You know, when it comes to war, anybody can be a hero. You know, or a villain, however you want to classify it. It's really hard to classify any of the characters in this franchise.
It's a lot of messaging that he's got, and it's weird. Like, and just to go back to an earlier point, like I say, like I may go back less and less to that game, but I keep going back. You know, like that's
It's
how
good,
frustratingly great this game can be.
It's the control. The controls are just fucking amazing. It's a pleasure to control the character in this game.
Absolutely.
I never felt, not once, like I was fighting the controls, and it's beautiful. I want to just add another thing, just since we're here, and I'm gonna be like the fake culture guy, whatever. But anyway, I got mad because they got the names wrong. They called themselves Ishmael and Ahab. Now, I happen to have read the fucking book way back when I was a teenager, and Ishmael is the one that makes Ahab cause his own, but Ahab is the one with the cause. So it's totally in fucking reverse in this game. They could have read the book.
So with everything that appears to be missing in this game, and all the places that the game seemingly wanted to go, the question it all comes down to is why? What happened? We were discussing earlier, in between the period of Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain, that there was this period of turbulence between Kojima, Konami, which ultimately ended up having them part ways. And obviously there were a lot of different ideas being thrown around at the time. The only thing that seemed really plausible to kind of link it all together at the time was that whole thing going on with Dr. Canavero and the fact that he was getting, his lawyer and the police filing paperwork and everything and getting legal matters involved. And as time went on, we started to hear other things. And it ultimately boils down to, very recently, Konami basically, it came out that Konami is going to sort of get out of AAA gaming. The only game that they have coming out now at this point is Pro Evolution Soccer, and they've pretty much stopped development on everything else. They're going to go with gambling, pachinko machines, and mobile gaming, that sort of thing, which struck a chord with a lot of gamers. There's a lot of people on one side that are saying, fuck Konami. And again, we discussed this a little bit earlier, I think just before Gabe joined, that seems to be the knee-jerk reaction. Fuck Konami. Without even knowing what's happening, what the actual reasons for everything is, it's fuck Konami. it is really sad because there's a lot of great IPs under Konami. I mean, you're talking Castlevania, you're talking Contra, and a multitude of other things that unless Konami start licensing everything out, it's going to be very sad to see a lot of these things die. Metal Gear Solid, we don't know if they're actually going to license that out anymore. I mean, wouldn't it just be, just theoretically speaking, wouldn't it be amazing if a company licenses Metal Gear Solid and then they hire Kojima to work on it?
Or the Fox.
That would be a funny story. But we don't know what happened. And everybody's automatically assuming the worst about the whole thing and that there's this big conspiracy. And I think really, personally, the simplest answer sometimes is the best. We know from history that Kojima is a perfectionist. And as a perfectionist, he's a guy that will look at something, and if it's not working, he's like, gotta get rid of it. It's gone. Sorry, we got to start that over from scratch. It's not working. Another thing, too, is that they designed the Fox engine from the ground up for this game. He basically said in an interview, the word that he said was that it was mandatory. Designing a new engine for this particular game was mandatory to achieve what he wanted to achieve. I'm not necessarily sure that's actually true. I think there's probably a number of engines out there that were probably flexible enough for him to do what he needed to do. Again, I don't know. I'm not the expert, but we do know how much of a perfectionist he is. And I think after working on everything, including the engine, for over 5 years for this game and spending $80 million, over $80 million, allegedly, in order to get this game complete, Konami basically, I think, said to him at some point, I also heard a rumor somewhere that they wanted Phantom Pain to sort of be a launch title for the next-gen consoles, PS4, Xbox One. Not sure how true that is. But obviously the game kept getting delayed, and, you know, they have shareholders to appease. They probably said, look, we've dealt with your shit long enough. This is when the game's going to be coming out. You have this much time to get it done. Get it out the door. And they kind of went their own separate ways after that. That's my personal feeling on the matter. And for anybody that's out there that's saying, listen, video game development, $80 isn't the end of the world. They were going to make money on $80 million. Even if they spent more money, they were going to make money on this game. Sure, but we have to, again, compare this game a little bit to The Witcher 3. CD Projekt Red, I think it was about $35 million that they spent actually developing the core game of The Witcher 3.
Oh, no, wait. $35 million was the total, including marketing, which is like 60%. So, how about that?
I thought I looked it up the other day. I'll have to fact check that. I thought they spent about 35 on development and another 35 on marketing.
I knew it differently, but I accept your numbers anyway.
Yeah, here's one from June 10th, 2015. I see an article that says The Witcher 3 cost $32 million to make, $35 million spent on marketing.
And another, yeah, that's what Google just shows me too. So like about 60 something.
Yeah, but even if it's less than that, that just even further exemplifies the point that I'm making, is that $80 million just for development alone, when you have a game as massive as The Witcher being done in less time by a smaller team, like, that's a long time to wait for a game. Over 5 years, developing the engine, delay, $80 million, not including marketing. I'm not going to be one of those people online that are just saying, fuck Konami, fuck Konami, fuck Konami. Because, again, I don't really know if this is what happened, but if this is what happened, if this is sort of why the game feels, from a narrative standpoint, less than half-baked, I can't really jump on the hate Konami train. I mean, video gaming at its core is not about charity. It is a business. And not only that, but it's a stealth game. The stealth genre does not sell quite like Grand Theft Auto or first-person shooters does. It's because it's Metal Gear and it's on multiple platforms, it will sell more copies, but it's still not going to sell quite the gangbusters that other video games are going to. At this point, I'm sure the game has already turned a profit, but Konami pretty much had enough, I'm sure. What are your guys' take on this whole thing?
It makes it also makes the cancellation of Silent Hills not that surprising, because if they're already spending $80 million to make this Metal Gear game, imagine what the budget would have been when you're including a Hollywood director and the star of like one of the biggest TV shows on cable, man, like when they had Norman Reedus on board.
Yep, that's true. And I kind of, and if things were, it kind of just begs the question that if things were kind of going south before they started getting all pissy about money, like I kind of wonder if Kojima was just sort of hiring big stars in order to waste money.
Just to piss them off, like
maybe it's possible. Who knows at this point? Anything is feasible.
Yeah.
The budget thing gets me mad when I think back. Like, it's weird how memories change, because I remember the whole Joaquin Mogren and Moby Dick Studios thing. I remembered it like with a smile, like, yeah, fucking Kojima, typical Kojima, classic Kojima. Now I'm like, motherfucking Kojima wasted money on that shit. And he could have finished the game. So yeah, it puts things into perspective a little bit.
There was also that story that I didn't pay attention to the details, that I think the developers were like, oh, we cut our summer vacation like a week short, or we didn't take a vacation
for the
like
PC
the last
version.
Couple of weeks. Oh, for the PC version, okay.
Yeah.
To meet the deadline, to meet the release or whatever.
It was supposed to come out 2 weeks after the console.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was trying to remember like what the exact story was for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what makes this idea of them just basically having a falling out, and part of it probably has to do with the fact that Konami is just like, we just don't want to do AAA gaming that much anymore, because the risk is so high and the reward might not be as much as the investment that you make, and if you screw up, maybe you don't make that money back and maybe you're losing money. We're just going to go for gambling and pachinko, and we'll stick to shit that we know is safe, and we'll just continue to be more profitable that way. The thing that makes this whole thing really, really bittersweet with the money clashing, if that's in fact what it was, is the fact that while in this industry, as someone in Kojima's position who is a creator, you have to keep your eye on time frames and money. You just have to. Otherwise, this is exactly what happens. Your vision will not come to life. But at the same time, it's so disheartening to see this fallout, and a major company, a major AAA company like Konami, let someone like Kojima go, because as we've discussed this entire time that we've been doing this podcast tonight, the gameplay alone holds this game up still to a very, very high regard. And it's because Kojima is the perfectionist he is. In a way, you need people like that in this industry who are going to say, it's not good enough, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. That's the sweet spot. That's where it's at. Let's work on that, and let's keep polishing that until it's done, and it will be amazing. Because what happens instead is we get games that are like, what happened here? It feels very empty and hollow. Like Shadow of Mordor is that kind of game. I think it originally was supposed to start out actually as another Batman Arkham style kind of a game, and they ended up changing the license to something else, to Lord of the Rings. And at that point, they probably had already spent so much time and money on like development under a different idea that it was just like, just blanket it and kind of make it feel like a package and then throw it out there. Yeah.
I don't know how that game reviewed the way it did. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't terrible. I think it was an average game. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was bad.
It wasn't
but
fundamentally
I didn't finish the game.
But it was like another Western like AAA checklist wannabe open world game.
Exactly. And Mad Max this year seems exactly like that game.
That's
just
exactly why I skipped that game.
Yep.
Me too.
I mean, I'll probably play it when I can get it for like $20, just because.
If the
but
easy, I'll play it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a $60 game for me though, and it's for that reason. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of thought put into that sort of thing. Where games by Kojima, you expect something that's amazing to play. And this whole falling out that happened between Kojima and Konami is a massive, massive loss in the industry, because I'm already seeing one of my favorite industries in the world, the film industry, sort of collapsing. I mean, it's making money, but the reason why it's making money is that they're saying, okay, either we're going to greenlight a really high-budget project that we know if we pump enough money and CGI into this fucking thing, it's going to make a shitload of money, or we're going to make a low-budget film that might gain attention at Cannes or Sundance, and it will at least have a chance to make its money back because it's very low risk because we're not spending that much on it. You don't see middle-of-the-road stuff anymore. And the reason for that being is that, okay, you could spend kind of a lot of money in this mid-range, but if it doesn't do well, that's a lot of money you could lose. And the video game industry at this point is the exact same way. The fact that Konami, okay, I know a lot of people out there hate Konami and they're kind of glad that they're bowing out of AAA game development. I don't see this as a good thing whatsoever. I don't see it as a good thing because, again, they have a lot of great IPs. Yes, they can license them out. Still, they were a major publisher and they've just decided to say, fuck it, we're out. I mean, there's other companies that have been hurting, such as Capcom. How long is it going to be before they have to face the same sort of situation and they just say, nope, we're not going to release Street Fighter every 2 years anymore? You know?
But here's the thing, though. I've been hearing that Capcom is in trouble for like 5 years at least now. But I checked the stocks, and they're rising. They're always rising. Like they're at their highest since like 7 years or something. So I don't know where all this Capcom has money trouble comes from. I think Capcom is not willing to do shit.
Which is just still stupid.
Yeah. But
considering the IPs that they have, I mean, holy shit, bring back Ghouls and Ghosts, you know? I mean,
yeah, but
at least
it's kind of the same situation. They say that a lot about Nintendo, right?
Yep.
Like people that don't buy Nintendo games think that Nintendo has no more money and is failing and blah blah blah, and they're fucking not.
Their war chest is ridiculous. Still, as far as I know.
Yeah, and they're actually turning profits now because they've turned into every other fucking 2-bit publisher in
Thanks
the
to
market.
people like me who like bought like half their Amiibo collection.
Oh God.
I'm not sure I'm going to invite you back to the next podcast.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I'm just kidding about that. But yeah, fuck you for buying Amiibo, seriously. I have a major problem with Amiibo. We can talk about that. But you have a question, you said?
No, I'm just saying I don't even play Smash Brothers, and I just bought them to collect them.
Like I would buy one Amiibo, and it would be Link because I fucking adore Legend of Zelda, and I would put it on my shelf upstairs in my retro game room with the rest of my Zelda stuff. That's about it.
Yeah. I bought the characters like I actually like. Like it's weird because I buy them as collectibles. I did use them in Mario Maker, but I don't like. They're just collectibles to me. Like I have not touched Smash Brothers since last year, and like I only used them like in 1 or 2 other games, and it's just so inconsequential to me. So that's why I don't think much of them.
But as I was saying before, I'm not excited about Konami bowing out because there's been this idea for a long time now, and it just sort of seems like a fable to most people that there's going to be another video game crash. And I know even major YouTube personalities out there like Boogie2988 coming to you live from the internet. You know, he's been sort of saying the same thing, and now that Konami bowed out, I think he's sort of saying, "Oh, I knew this was going to happen."
I was kind of the worst shit, though. I mean, he
does.
Single.
I'm sorry, Gus, but yeah, he totally supports like fucking Skylanders and buying Amiibos and all this other shit, and he's like sucking Nintendo's dick every 2 minutes.
He's proactively trying to make the video game industry crash.
Well, he's giving. Okay, look. To be fair, and I don't want to get
I
on a
wouldn't
too
mind
long.
if this industry crashed again. Like,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not even kidding. Like, I would not mind if this industry crashed, just to learn a few lessons from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if even we're at the point now, and look, I'm not saying that the video game industry is going to crash in like the next year, 2 years, or even 5 years, but we are moving to a very, very dangerous place where if these publishers are not willing to gamble with their money on interesting concepts anymore at all, or to use people like Kojima who have great ideas and will not settle for just, it's good enough, okay, let's package it and ship it out the door, we're just going to end up with the major big publishers that are left, and maybe once in a while one of the major publishers will drop, which means there will be less competition, which is never a good thing. And they're going to start playing it safe, and all we're ever going to see anymore, and we're already seeing it now, all we're going to see are the annual franchises that make money until they die, and then they'll make new ones. I mean, this holiday season alone, we're getting what? We're getting Halo. We're getting another Tomb Raider. We're getting Assassin's Creed. We're getting Call of Duty.
Assassin's Creed is not annual.
It's not?
No, it's not, absolutely not. It came out in 2007. So it's 8 years, and in 8 years there's been 22 games. So it's almost 3 games a year. I'm not fucking kidding.
Jeez.
Yeah, I actually said something about this, I think, on Twitter, like earlier in the year when they announced the 2 like side-scrolling Assassin's Creed games that you can buy this year. And like there was the Assassin's Creed Unity PC release. There were the 2 side-scrolly type games, or was it 3? Maybe it was 3. And then, of course, there was going to be Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And, of course, I thought, oh, well, then they're going to have a mobile app for that. So, yeah, it's a machine. It's a big machine.
I'm not kidding. It's 22 games in 8 years.
Yeah, that's where we're at. And the thing is, so many people are saying, I want something new. I want something new. I want something new. And then, Call of Duty comes out, and then it's like, oh, it sold more than anything this year because it's fucking Call of Duty. Why?
That's because a small bubble of people, which might include us, like want something quote new. But like, this is such an industry that's afraid to be new because of sales. Because honestly, like this consumer base, at least, this bubble maybe, I don't know, like is kind of afraid of getting burned on $60 new, and especially with the way like games get released now, where they're broken garbage. Speaking of broken garbage, you know what? I actually played Assassin's Creed Unity over the summer.
Why?
Speaking of, because it was cheap, and I was like, let me see if I can get a platinum, and it's like they actually fixed. I guess because it was like a month ago or 2, they actually fixed most of it, but like it's still like whatever the broken bugs that were plaguing that game, it's still irrelevant because the game itself, even if it was polished, is like it's the most like let's throw every single thing on the wall and see what sticks kind of game.
Oh, and since we said a lot of bad things about Metal Gear Solid, can we just say how amazingly it launched? Like everything was working.
Oh yeah, except for the servers for a little bit, but there was nothing in the game that was broken.
But it was still like the online. Yeah, I mean the game itself. I know what you're saying. The game itself like wasn't totally broken, except for that patch, that thing where you couldn't have quiet for 2 missions because it was.
Yeah. Actually, I learned about that when I already did the mission, and I had no issues. So I guess it was something.
It might have been less severe than they made it out to be. Because they patched it before I even got to that point, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hammered that out pretty quickly, and there hasn't really been any like I was just thinking to myself last night when I was playing Phantom Pain, and I go and I see the main menu screen where Boss is sitting in the chopper. It says version 1.02. Any other game at this point would be like it's version 2.8, because they would have patched it so many times.
Or version 0.9, like Uncharted Trilogy. I'm not kidding.
I know you're not kidding. I saw that too.
Yeah, and oh God. Do you guys remember when I told you that some companies were using delays as marketing material?
Yes.
Like,
We've been waiting
was it
very anxiously to hear about this for a long time.
was it like a year ago or something? And I specifically mentioned a game that they faked a delay because there was no delay. It was already scheduled farther ahead than when they said. So now I'm just gonna come clean with it. It was Uncharted, and motherfuckers, I saw the headline.
The collection or the fourth game?
No, the fourth one. I saw now it is making the rounds on the forums that Naughty Dogs are amazing because somebody either tweet or there was an interview or something where they said, we delayed the game because we wanted the conclusion of the saga to be perfect.
Bullshit.
And you know, how long ago did I tell you that? Just how fucking long ago?
I vaguely remember that now. Oh my God.
And they are the champions of the people's champions now. And it's bullshit, and people lap it up like it's nobody's business.
I saw that story, and even without hearing, because look, behind the scenes, you've never even expressed to me what games specifically were the ones that had specifically been delayed. I just said, hey, we're going to talk about it on the next podcast, and we never did, even though I've been poking you in the ribs about it ever since. I never knew, but I knew when I saw that story, I knew it was a load of shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a load of shit even that basically they said they're getting praised because there's a little patch for the trilogy which brings the game to 1.0. And I'm like, okay, so that to me says that you're fucking selling me a game that it's not finished at all.
Yeah.
That's what I take from that.
I still have arguments.
And it's not even a fucking new game. I mean, what the fuck, guys? These games have been around for a long time. I don't know.
But it's Blue Point, so it's I will give like the benefit of the doubt because I think it's Blue Point games, and they've been pretty solid with their remasters and stuff. So hopefully, what comes out is like a pretty solid game.
Oh, I'm not shitting on the game itself. I'm just saying, it's so fucking weird the whole acceptance that people developed for everything basically.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that I have and get downvoted a lot for on Reddit, because a lot of the conversations that come up, like especially when it comes to Nintendo, and I love Nintendo and I love Nintendo games, and I've been having a blast lately with Mario Maker, okay? But the thing is that whenever Nintendo leaves something out of a game, I see people literally say on forums, anywhere on the web where they're talking about video games, basically they say, oh man, wouldn't that be cool if they had it in the game? I hope they bring it as DLC. I hope they bring it as DLC. Yeah. And I'm like, why are you fucking having this conversation at this point where you're like, you know it's not in the game, it should have been in the game, because if you data mine this shit, there's stuff in the files stating that it's worked in there already somehow. Why are you wishing for them to sell this to you on top of the $60 package? You should be saying, why isn't this in the $60 package that I just bought? Why isn't it in there already?
There's an incredible number of dumb motherfuckers that are doing just the exact same with Mission 51 for Phantom Pain. They're all hoping that it comes out as DLC.
I don't even want Chapter 3. I stopped caring. Like once you got into the narrative to where you got it, like Chapter 3 isn't gonna get me crawling back to this. Like you had your chance.
Right. Even if Chapter 3 ends up wrapping everything up really, really nicely, it's not going to make everything that happened in the first two chapters, and a lot of the stuff that seems half-baked in the actual gameplay elements, such as, the stuff with the mother base, and especially the animal platform, which means absolutely nothing. The relationships that you're supposed to be forging along the way that actually amount to nothing. The characters that they set up in Ground Zeroes that actually end up amounting to nothing. The villains that you come across in the actual game, and their conclusions end up amounting to nothing. You know, it's a running theme here. Chapter 3 is not going to fix all that shit. It's just not, and that's part of the problem here, and it's part of why I started going into this whole thing about the development cycle and everything. And it's like gamers at this point, and I'm not trying to get angry at gamers, and at the same time I also want to be very, very clear, just as a side note. I don't want to make it sound like that. Oh God, what was I going to say? I lost it. Shit, it's getting late and I'm tired.
Sorry, Kojima lost it too.
Yeah, I just lost my point, just like Kojima lost his story. But yeah, we're at a point here where this sort of thing is just going to be happening more and more, and consumer complacency is why this is allowed to happen. And this is why companies are not going to be taking risks anymore, because they have pre-orders which tell them how much money they should be investing into these games or not, based on those pre-order numbers. And they could lessen development time based on pre-order numbers, or extend it based on how much of a profit margin that they want to end up having at the end of the day. And part of that probably all factored in with the Phantom Pain. And I know Kojima's been on record stating that Ground Zeroes he wished ideally would have been released at the same time as Phantom Pain. And then he said, but you know what? We had the finished product sitting around with Ground Zeroes, and we figured, why make people wait? They want something now. Let's give it to them. I don't feel for 1 second that that's what's been going on. I think Kojima has been trying to be a good representative for Konami, even though his relationship with them has been collapsing. Even now, if you notice, he has not been out there. I mean, of course, there's probably contracts and shit that prevent him from talking about it, but he very easily could have, been out there giving very cryptic messages saying, kind of hinting at what's going on. But he's just been out there saying, basically, he's really happy that people are playing and enjoying his game, and that I think he even said something on Twitter not too long ago, within the last week or two, that he was sort of defending the way that the game is as it stands right now, and sort of what it means. I just think it's a lot of diplomatic bullshit, so that he can just sort of kind of keep his head high and not really keep his eyes to the ground, or kind of keep darting daggers to Konami or whatever, and also to look very attractive to employers in the future. And
you also made a tweet, though, that it was very weird, at least for us fans. He said he wanted to specify that this game is Metal Gear Solid V, not Metal Gear Solid 5, which might not seem like a big deal, but if you know the man, it is a big deal, because it's sort of like saying it's not a numbered entry. So that tweet was really out of the blue.
And you know what?
Venereal disease is why.
Yeah, I've tried to dissect that myself, and no matter what way I try and take it, it doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, you play as punished Venom Snake. Venom Snake, okay? So Metal Gear Solid V could mean Venom. Metal Gear Solid V could mean, it could mean anything.
Could be a split in the road, like two paths dividing.
Ooh.
Yeah, meta.
Or maybe it's just because he knows that it's wedged in the middle of the timeline, and he doesn't specifically want people to think that it's the 5th game in the franchise overall, because it doesn't really fit in that way. which also doesn't make any sense because the entire chronology in the way these games have been released over the years have been completely fucked. So, I mean, and he's also trying to justify that since you gave away what was happening with Big Boss earlier, Gabe, Mr. Spoiler Man tonight. You didn't?
I said aftershave commercial. That's all that happens.
Okay. I won't go there then. But he all I'm going to say is that he's trying to link the events in this game into the original Metal Gear game that was made. Not Metal Gear Solid, the original Metal Gear game way back in the day, which I also think is bullshit. I don't think this was the master plan all along.
By answering a question that nobody fucking answered. Okay.
Yeah, no one asked. Like once we played Metal Gear Solid 3, it was like, I get it, man. I get Big Boss. I get it. Cool. That's how he became Big Boss, huh? I'm cool.
It was perfect.
So, but despite all this, and despite the fact that Kojima is very much on record as being a perfectionist, like you hear a lot of different stories in the news, like, that they had acquired like the rights to like 40 different songs to use in the game, and he scrapped every single one of them because he didn't like them with the game. Shit like that. He's still going to have numerous offers on the table. I don't think Kojima's going anywhere. I mean, he's
already had offers by Tencent, by the guys of oh god, I don't remember their name. The guys from Lords of the Fallen, and apparently there's some interest even in my mother base, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really sure what else we could add to the conversation this evening, unless anybody had any different ideas or theories as to the falling out to Kojima and Konami, or if you want to agree or even disagree with my assessment that we need people like Kojima in this industry to be a little bit more, perfectionists with their games.
I know that I said that I was frustrated with that guy because I just generally like that cult of personality is what frustrates me. But I can't say or I can't deny that there's a certain signature to his games in which I keep coming back to them because in spite of how just insane they get, like I can at least appreciate his attention to detail, or at least like what he's got his team doing, because it's like I'm contradicting myself, but maybe he is some kind of weird secret genius after all. You know what I'm saying? Like,
when it comes to gameplay, I think he certainly is.
He's nailed it.
Absolutely.
In his own way.
And that's probably the greatest crime of all in regards to Metal Gear Solid 5. It's not the fact that the narrative sucks. It's not the fact that this sort of seems like a sour note to go on for Kojima as his last game with Konami, because the narrative really just falls apart entirely and it doesn't connect on any of those levels that it wants to. It's the fact that as gamers, now that we know that there's cut content, and there's even new stories leaking out now that there's additional cut content that isn't mentioned in the collector's edition, such as I think there was a mention of an additional boss fight, like an actual boss fight with Skullface in the game that didn't end up making the cut based on a bunch of...
because of the dialogue lines that were leaked?
Yes. Yes,
because
it was.
I have a different interpretation for those dialogue lines.
Okay.
I think they could have been triggered if you pointed your gun during the Jeep or something, because they don't seem like boss fight lines. They seem like he says, "I put away my weapon," or "Yeah, what, you're gonna shoot me? You're just gonna kill a man." So that would have been very Kojima to insert something there for me. But anyway, the Blu-ray of the collector is pure shit. Let me just say that. There's no making of, there's no fucking nothing. There's Mission 51 and a bunch of interviews basically masturbating Kojima. That's it.
basically. And of course, even though that cut content is on there, Mission 51, people still want to somehow come up with the idea that we're still going to get Act 3 at some point and that it's just waiting in the wings somewhere. Why would they include the cut content on the collector's edition? Just because.
Yeah.
And people are coming up with the most insane reasons to justify the existence of it. Well, Kojima just wanted to, he's very slyly putting it in there to let us know that it's there. Maybe it's coming. I don't think so. As I was saying before, I think the worst thing about this whole situation is that regardless of how amazing this game is gameplay-wise, up there is the best as 2015 as far as I'm concerned so far. And it's probably going to remain in that position for me as far as gameplay is concerned. There's always going to be that thought in the back of our minds of what could have been. Yeah. And it's never going to be answered. It's never going to be, and even if it is answered, it's still not going to provide closure. It's still not going to provide actual resolve to the game itself. I mean, I know we've spent a lot of time here tonight talking about the negatives as far as Metal Gear Solid 5 and why there's so much wrong with it, but it's not because we're here just to be negative and to, quote-unquote shit on the game. It's because nobody else is talking about this except on message forums. You go into the major mainstream websites and you look at the reviews. It's as I said, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 5 out of 5. The game is flawless. It's perfect. Go out and buy it. I mean, what are these people on? Like, I know that you said earlier that, there's time constraints with reviews. Consumers need to understand that these reviews are always like that. Let's say they don't actually have access to a game at their office before a game comes out. They have to actually go to some location that they have to fly out to. And it's like, oh, look, you go to a hotel and it's a vacation. Well, no, it's not. You literally have a schedule where you get up, you play games. In between, you probably have food brought to you, drinks brought to you, to keep you comfortable, to keep you fed, and to keep you relatively happy while you're trying to play this game so that you don't let that negatively influence your review of the game. You take in so much information in a 2-day, maybe 3-day period, and then you have to go back and crank out a review in a couple of days. It's like it's not the proper way to ingest a game. You have to be someone who sits down and enjoys video games at your leisure. You can't take these websites for their word. And not only because of the fact that these review conditions to begin with are terrible, but also because the fact that in some cases, some of these reviews really are bought and paid for. Maybe not always with money or advertising money, let alone the occasional bribe, but also because there's gift baskets and there's listen, hey, we really like what you do at your website or at your publishing company. We love what you do, and then they treat them real nice and make them feel real good before these games get their reviews written for. There's a lot of that going on in the industry.
I don't know if it ever went public just how much shit Destiny related shit is thrown at reviewers and previewers. Like, I'm talking bags and baskets and bags over bags over bags of stuff.
I don't think it was, and I know that's something that you mentioned to me before.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that ever went public, but they're not the only ones that have been known to, really treat the right people right along the way either.
Warner Brothers is right up there.
Yep, and that's what I was thinking. I didn't want to come out and say it.
Oh, well.
No, just because you said it, and I don't want to say anything that you ever tell me. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Because I'm good like that. I'm respectful.
I'm trying so hard to get fired lately.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Bullshit. You're like their pet over at fucking PlayStation Italy.
It's weird because I'm very outspoken and everybody knows me, so.
It's true. Gabe constantly, he'll write to me and be like, "It got published. I don't know how, but it did."
That's awesome.
They even accent some of his writing stories. Like he wrote something not too long ago, and they put some chicken like fucking like lingerie and whips and everything in there for
Yeah.
pictures for it.
It was about gender equality and all the feminazi. And
So they put the most. So they put the most fucking like gratuitous pictures in there to highlight female equality in video games.
oh god.
They probably don't even read your articles. They're just like, it's a
Oh my
game. Let's put it in the magazine.
Oh shit!
You know, you just crushed my ego because I'm always so proud of the fact that I've never been edited once. And now maybe you just got me the explanation, and I'm gonna cry now. They're not reading.
Well, that just means that they know your writing is so good that they're just not checking it anymore.
Yeah, trying to make it up now.
They're like, gender equality. I know, chicken lingerie and leather and whips. It's amazing. Yeah, I really wish that we could all read Gabe's writing all the time, but we can't because we don't know Italian. I think what really needs to happen is that he needs to come on to this podcast every month, and he needs to broadcast an English interpretation for everyone so that we can get
because the hours are so friendly to me that I can't wait to be awake at 5:13 in the morning.
Hey, you know how much I appreciate you being here.
Oh, you owe me a beer no matter what, so.
A beer? If I ever fucking get my ass to Italy, I'm gonna bring you a bottle of scotch, motherfucker.
Okay.
Fuck your beer. You're owed well more than that. And Gus, it's been fun having you here, of course.
Always.
Well. Yeah. Well, I mean, we had gone a long time where we weren't even really in contact anymore. Gus and I, we were writing on a different website for a little bit, which we kind of didn't really because it didn't really go anywhere. It was only like about a month before I think everybody started dropping off like flies. And
I felt kind of bad about it, and I know there was some stuff going on, I guess, but it just kind of fell off. It wasn't like hard feelings, at least for me or anything. It was just
I even get that with my little no-name website here too. It's just as I said, I didn't know who was going to show up. Like the whole reason why we selected tonight for the cast is because we had our guy who normally joins us, Garrett. Tonight was good for him, and he's MIA. I have no idea where he is. I messaged him, "Are you good tonight?" I messaged him on Skype and on Reddit, and we miss him, and it's too bad he couldn't be here because I know that he's been playing this game, and I know his opinion has been that he's loving playing this game probably more than anything. It's probably one of the best games he's ever played, but more or less he feels the same way that we do about the narrative. He says it's one of the best games he's ever played, not one of the best Metal Gears he's played. Which I think sums the whole thing up nicely. Seriously. So it's a shame he couldn't have been here for the conversation. But, guys, is there anything else to add tonight? I think we pretty much covered it all, huh?
Yeah, man, like, I don't, like, in spite of the conversation we were having, like, I don't hate the Phantom Pain. I think it's just because, like, it does so many great things that, like, all the disparities about it are just more frustrating. They're like, more accentuated as a result.
And that might be one of the best compliments to give a game, that it's so strong in so many respects that it makes the flaws stand out that much more.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and if you're watching on YouTube right now, thanks for checking in. It is now the Greatness Delayed podcast, as you can see by the name, so that's what we're going to be rolling with from now on. Be sure to stop frequently at bitesizeimpressions.com and to check me out at Bite Size Imp, as you see there in my name tag on Twitter all the time. I'm always posting there. So, Gabe, is there anything that you want to pimp out here?
No.
Well, if you know Italian, subscribe to PlayStation Magazine Italia.
Of course.
What about you, Gus? You got a blog you're working on.
I do. I haven't written much of it. The last thing I wrote was actually about The Witcher 3, actually, because I was praising the way it does side missions. Because I like the way how, side missions in games are always kind of like, a time waster by design, but they're not always implemented well, like narrative-wise. But I like that Geralt, because it's my first Witcher game, like technically my first that I'm playing more than like 2 hours worth. But I like that Geralt just wants to get paid. That's his motivation for doing that shit. And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. And it gives me incentive to play that. And that was what my last blog entry was about. Other than that, like, no, because lately I'm studying, like, I'm learning how to write, like, code for web development. That's something I've been working on over the summer. I'm still, like, a noob. So that's the field, like, I'm working on getting into. And, you know, if I feel comfortable, like, with that and I get, like, a decent gig, like a job doing that, then I feel like I can try to find time for games, leisure games writing, too, again, at some point.
Right.
And you should, because you're a damn good writer.
Oh, thank you.
He is. Yeah. So what's your blog site there? I'm trying to help you out here. Throw it out there.
It's it's just a very gooster at .wordpress.com.
And that's Guster for the Gooster part of that.
No, sorry.
No, it's
GOOTER.
Okay, well, don't listen to me. Listen to what he just said, because I fucked that up royally. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night, man. Take it easy.
Goodbye.